Chair Smith, I can confirm we are streaming. You can call the meeting to order.
All right. Just lost everybody. Okay, welcome everybody. Today is February 28th, and we are here for our February meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. I've called the meeting to order, and as always, acknowledge that we are on Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people, and the municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaty signed in this period, recognize that we are all treaty people. Start with any community announcements. Does anyone have any community announcements they'd like to acknowledge at all? Seeing none, I guess really quickly just acknowledge our residents who may have family that is in the Ukraine at the moment. So if you're down City Hall, we do have that lit up the colors of the Ukrainian flag. So we do keep our thoughts with all those facing current crisis right now over Ukraine at the moment. Approval of the minutes, January 17th, 31st, and February 3rd, 2022. Mover and seconder.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Second by anyone? Commissioner Blackburn?
Oh, yep.
Thank you. Any errors or omissions with the minutes? All right, seeing none, call for the question on the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. All right, so approval order of business, approval of additions and deletions. I believe there's no additions or deletions, clerk.
Thank you, Chair Smith. There are no additions or deletions from the clerk's office today.
Okay, thank you. What we'll do is item 8.1. Let me just make sure. Yeah, 8.1, Board of Police Commissioners Subcommittee to defining the police report. Since we haven't had an opportunity to discuss this yet here, we're going to hold off the discussion until we have Dr. Jones in the meeting, who's teaching a class at the moment. So whenever we have her attendance, we'll start that item. So we'll continue to go through the agenda as scheduled, and we'll pause when we have her in the meeting, and then we'll deal with 8.1 if that works for folks. So really don't need to change too much, just making a note that when she does arrive, we'll take a pause on whatever item we're on, just so we can deal with that, so folks can ask questions if they have any.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a quick question just
Yes.
before we go any further? The approval of the minutes, when you spoke to them, was it recognized that there were 3 sets of minutes?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, just that I wasn't sure if you covered off all 3. I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that we were approving 3 sets. Yeah, on the 31st and 17th of January and February 3rd. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. All right, so we're going to continue to approve the agenda as presented.
Chair, there was one other thing too. I think
sorry.
Commissioner Blackburn wanted to move 11.2.1 up to 8 as well, the subcommittee.
Oh, right. You're right. Yeah. 11.2.8. Let me just get down to that, which is
1121.
yeah.
11.2.1. Yeah.
11.2.1, which was review of the defined funding police report subcommittee, which the motion is there. I don't read it at the moment. So yeah, that makes sense to do that as well. So we'll put that after 8.1.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Marty. All right, all those in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, so we have an agenda. So moving on to business arising out of the minutes. There's none. declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declaration of conflict of interest? Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I'll declare a conflict of interest in relation to item 11.2.1, the subcommittee to review the report. I spoke to that last meeting. Just to reiterate, when I had some fairly significant involvement with the drafting of the report. I made that known at the time that I joined the commission, both in my written application and my interview. But I will declare a conflict on that out of an abundance of caution. And I'll also declare a conflict in respect to the motion on rescission.
Thank you. Any others?
Oh, Chair Smith, maybe just one more point I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Just to perhaps for the benefit of the public or other board members, the point around the motion of rescission. This is in relation to the motions from September and October. And Mr. Ward and I have had some discussions about basically that, and I'm prepared to declare a conflict in respect to those motions. But I just wanted to quickly note that I didn't not declare a conflict at that time out of a bad faith basis or anything like that. I went back and looked at the training that we received as board members, and the only conflict of interest provisions that were referenced in the training were in relation to the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. So as a new board member, I tried to do my due diligence. I went and read that legislation. I noted there that conflicts were defined as pecuniary conflicts, and I determined that I didn't have a pecuniary conflict. I've since learned from discussions with Mr. Ward that the scope of conflicts is broader than that. But I just wanted to provide a basis, just a quick understanding as to why that happened the way it did, and to assure everyone that I moved those motions on a good faith basis.
Appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, no, seeing none. I did forget to do a quick check for folks, video and audio, but so far I think everyone has spoken at least once. Commissioner Thomas, I do see you. We'll just do a quick audio check.
Hello, how you doing?
All right, great.
You good?
Yeah, sorry. Yep, thank you. So sorry I forgot to do that at the beginning. All right, so moving on to motions of rescission. Now this is September 20th, 2021 and October 18th, 2021. And there's a few steps we need to get here in order to deal with this item. So as mentioned earlier by Commissioner Critchley, this rescind motion is related to the petition related to East Coast Prison Justice Society, and the October 18th motion, which was the correct requested independent legal opinion on the jurisdictional authority for the commission. So what we're going to do is go through a process, and clerk, hopefully you can support us in this, because there's a few steps we need to do. So to rescind those two motions and vote on that, and then hopefully it's the will of the commission to bring those motions back on the floor and vote on them and go from there. These are already items that we've supported in the past, so I hope we can continue this process. But obviously we can still have discussion and debate as if the motions are still on the floor for the first time. So any question, clarification that folks will need, we can, once we deal with the rescind, and if a member wants to put it on the floor again, then we can have debate, clarification, whatever folks need to do. So before we do that, we do have the first step of rescinding those two motions. And in order to do that, we need a motion that the Board of Police Commissioners waive Section 63(3) of Administrative Order 1 respecting notice of motion for a motion of rescission. So I need someone to move and second that.
Mr. Chair, I'll move it. Do you want me to read it?
So really quickly, Ian, would Commissioner Kent be reading the motions themselves, or would this just be we're just waiving the rules first?
Because this motion requires a 2/3 majority, my recommendation would be to read the motions and vote on them individually.
Okay.
Because they do require 2/3. I will also be passing this over to Andrea to be helping navigate some of the pieces through.
Great.
So Ian, while you're there, am I reading 1, 2, and 1 and 2? Under the motion of rescission?
No,
We would need to do the first motion individually and vote on
Yeah,
it separately,
okay.
Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. I move that the Board of Police Commissioners rescind the September 20th, 2021 motion deferring receipt of the petition from, it says East Cast, is that correct? East Coast.
East Coast, yeah.
East Coast Prison Justice Society, and discussion of the request in the petition to the next meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. So moved.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yep. Move to
no, you
second.
need two motions here. The first motion is only to suspend the rules, 63-3.
Yes, you're right. Yes.
Once you
Okay.
pass that, then you can bring the second motion,
Okay. So let's.
assuming it passes.
I have posted the first motion into the chat.
Ah, sorry, Ian, I
Okay.
missed that. I'll move that the Board of Police Commission waive section 63-3 of Administrative Order 1 respecting notice of motion for a motion of rescission.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner McDougall. Any comments on this motion here? Seeing none, call for the question on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Okay, I believe that's 2/3 with nobody saying nay.
Chair Smith, I can confirm that has been recorded as a unanimous vote of the Board of Police Commissioners.
All right, so now we can go to the motion that was put on the floor earlier, number 1. Does it need to be read in the record again, or?
I'll move.
Yeah, I guess it should probably be.
Move that the Board of Police Commissioners rescind the motion, the September 20th, 2021 motion deferring receipt of the petition from the East Coast Prison Justice Society and discussion of the request in the petition to the next meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners. So moved.
Second it.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner McDougall. Did we just call for the question on this item? If there's any comments? Seeing no comments, question on this item?
Question?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. Okay, next one, number 2.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the Board of Police Commissioners rescind the following October 18th, 2021 motions. A, requesting an independent legal opinion and a staff report on the jurisdictional authority for the commission to create a terms of reference for an independent civilian review. And B, deferring a motion to prepare a mandate for an independent civilian review of the HRP's handling of protests on August 18th, 2021, pending receipt of the independent legal opinion and staff report. So moved.
Second.
Seconded by, thank you, Commissioner Blackburn, second that. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, that's unanimous. So at this point, the rescind motions have passed. So if a commissioner would like to bring those motions back on the floor, 2 things will need to happen. Do we need to waive the rules in order to bring these motions on the floor? Yes, we do. I see Marty. Okay.
Okay.
So if you could, I think they're in the chat already. So the question is, would anyone like to bring these motions back on the floor, first waiving the rules?
I'll do that, Mr. Chair. Is this the same, the 16-3 of A01?
And something was put in the chat. Yes, so
Oh.
the last thing in the chat, you can read that.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the Board of Police Commissioners, per section 49(1) of Administrative Order 1, waives notice of motion for motions relating to the East Coast Prison Society petition tabled at the Commission's September 20th, 2021 meeting. I so move.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Kent. So once that has been, now that we've waived the rules, we can discuss this item.
We have to vote on waiving the rules, don't we?
Oh, sorry, yes, we have to wait, but if we're waiving the rules, are we waiving the rules to allow discussion, or do we vote and then we can have discussion after we vote?
You're waiving the notice of motion rule,
Okay,
right? And then someone has to put the motion on the floor, and then you can have your discussion.
okay, all right.
So there's
So-
essentially, there's a motion has to be approved to waive the rules, and then second, put the motion on the floor, and then discussion, and then vote on that.
Okay, thanks. So we'll call for the question on waiving of the rules.
Question?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Okay, so now would somebody like to put the motion on the floor, which if you don't mind, Andrea or Ian, if you can put it in the chat for whoever would like to move it reference. And before we do that, are there any, because this is a motion, that would anyone like to deem any conflict on this item?
Should I deem a conflict again?
I don't know, because it wasn't on the agenda earlier, so I don't know.
Okay, then
if
I
we have to
will,
do
I will
that.
deem a conflict.
Okay, thank you.
I can put the motion on the floor, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you.
All right, I move that the Board of Police Commissioners request an independent legal opinion and a staff report on the jurisdictional authority for the commission to create a terms of reference for an independent civilian review of the oversight, governance, and policy aspects of the handling of the protests on August 18th, 2021, and that the following motion be deferred until that opinion is received. That the Board of Police Commissioners prepare a draft of a mandate in terms of reference for an independent civilian review of the oversight, governance, and policy aspects of the HRP's handling of the protest on August 18th, 2021, which mandate and terms of reference will be received and reviewed by the board at their November meeting. I so move.
I'll second it.
Moved and
The only
seconded.
change you may, Mr. Chair, would be November date.
Exactly, that's what I was gonna ask. So would
Oh.
we, I guess, friendly amendment to our March meeting, maybe? Would that be?
Sure, sure, Smith, if I could offer, we may just, it may be easiest to put it as a future meeting. It would allow it to come to March or any point in time.
Okay, we'll say, if it's okay, we'll do a future meeting. Last sentence would read, which mandate in terms of reference will be received and reviewed by the board at a future meeting.
Sounds good.
All right. So mover and seconder deem that as friendly. Any comments on this motion?
So really the question, just, Mr. Chair, if I can,
Yep. Commissioner Kent?
so we'd be, just for clarity on this, we were looking for an independent, just some jurisdictional insight on whether or not we can proceed with what was originally intended in the motion, which is the second part.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Is that a Commissioner?
So there's a second motion in the chat. I assume, Ian, that's coming later?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the next one.
Okay, thank you.
And just to further explain that for folks too, so because we had a process realization, thanks to Marty, we still hope to bring this forward as soon as we can, and we'll make sure that the commission is aware of any updates. So that work will happen, and hopefully sooner than later. We can get this aspect of it done to move forward with the other pieces. So doing this today just allows us to continue the work, but deal with the process issues that we just realized. So if there's no further comments, nobody's in the chat, I ask for the question on this item.
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay.
I
Hey.
I was still reading.
You said nay for you, Mr. Kent?
Oh, it's an aye. I
Okay,
missed it.
no worries.
I'm still reading the motions. Make sure I
I
understand.
know there's a lot. So the next one is which would be 2 steps again. We have to waive the notice of motion and then put the motion on the floor. So this waiving of the notice of motion would be for the item.
Chair Smith? Chair
Is this
Dennis,
the deferral?
that was completed with the last action. The
Oh,
one that
right,
I
because you put
Yeah.
them together.
I just put the revised wording to ensure that we were clear on it. So I just put the revised wording in there for at a future meeting. So you have completed all the
Right.
procedural aspects.
All
of
right,
this.
excellent.
I said that's where I was trying to follow
Right.
it. Okay, I feel like we just handled that. Okay,
Right.
good. Okay.
No, excellent. See, that's efficiency. Thank you, Ian and team. All right, so let me just make sure I'm not skipping any step. We just handled that. We did the rescission. We voted on the item. All right, so we're now to deferred business, which is 8.1. I know that we were waiting for Dr. Jones, who I don't see, but it's not 1 o'clock yet, probably still teaching. So what we'll do is we'll move. Do we have a presenter here yet?
Chair Smith, the presenter is not in the meeting yet.
Okay. Everything else might take a little bit, but we can start the discussion, and if there's any questions, we can maybe make note of the questions, and then when Ms. Jones joins us, we'll just present them. Does that work for folks?
Is there a reason why we wouldn't start the third quarter financial updates?
Why
Go on with the agenda.
Okay, if folks don't mind getting into that, because I believe we have a presentation, but if folks don't mind cutting that in the middle of it, I have no problem with that either. Okay. All right, so I'll just continue. We don't have a presenter at the moment, and clerks will work to try to get a presenter in the meeting. Information items brought forward, we have none. Reports and discussion, 11.1.1, Halifax Regional Police Quarterly Fiscal Update. And Chief Kinsella, you are up.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you through you, Chair, to the Commission. I'll just do a brief background on the third quarter, and then if there's any questions or detailed questions, Mr. Horton is here to advise on any of that. So HRP's operating budget is approved annually by the Board of Police Commissioners and Halifax Regional Council. For the 2021-2022 fiscal year, the Halifax Regional Police was approved for an operating budget of $88,810,800. At the end of the third quarter, so December 31st, 2021, of this fiscal year, Halifax Regional Police reported $64,821,570, or 73% in assigned net operating funds utilized, while forecasting $87,567,500 of the approved operating budget to be spent by March 31st, 2022. This will result in an estimated surplus of just over $1.2 million. And
Keith, do you mind me interrupting? Are we supposed to be seeing a slide or anything?
no, it would have been a report that would have been sent out with your package.
Okay,
So the details are provided in the report in advance of the meeting, and Mr. Horton is here. If you have any detailed questions, or if you have any questions of me, we can go from there.
Thank you, Chief. Members, if you have any questions, just put it in the chat or put your hand up. Yep, Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Chief Kinsella. I'm just wondering, are you perhaps thinking that you might end out the fiscal year with a surplus? And if there is a surplus, what happens to that money? Thank you.
So we are anticipating a surplus, Commissioner, and through you, Chair, to an entire board. Any surplus will be returned back into the city coffers.
Thank you very much.
Really quickly, Chief, I wonder if a little bit more information can be provided on line, I guess, in number 2, increase in attrition, turnover, unpaid leave, pre-retirement, etc. Just a little bit more information for me on what that means.
Yeah, for sure, Chair, and through you, I would invite Mr. Horton to join me, and he can provide some further information.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Craig Horton. I'm the financial coordinator for Halifax Regional Police. Mr. Chair, that line item, increase in attrition turnover, that's positions that are either vacant or the individuals in them are not being paid for whatever reason. That's the number that it's a credit in our budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so that $3,344,000, you can see it's kind of offset by the increase in overtime costs. So the positions that are either vacant or are, they're, for whatever reason, it's an LTD situation, or we're not paying those individuals, that's the savings that accumulates. And then it's largely offset by the increase in overtime costs that we're incurring at the moment.
Right. So then when you look at the extra duty jobs, that also, or extra duty costs, that also falls within that line as well as
So under the area of compensation, you have different lines. You have salaries, you have benefits, you have attrition and turnover, you have court time and overtime, and then we also have a line in ours for extra duty, and what that is, those jobs that whether we're providing escorts for trucks coming into the, large equipment coming into the city, or it could be a special event or whatnot. We're starting to see an increase in those costs after COVID, where more of those jobs are taking place. So we had reduced the budget at COVID time because we weren't seeing those kind of costs go through. Now they are, so we're projecting them back in, and we also included we allowed for that in the proposed budget that's going forward for next year. So kind of getting that back on track to where it normally was.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any other questions. I don't believe there's any motion to approve on that. Nope, there's not. So if members are okay, we'll move on to our next item, which is 11.12, Halifax Regional Police Strategic Plan Update.
Chair Smith, if you don't mind the interruption, Al Jones has joined the meeting, so if we want to go to 8.1 now, we can.
Okay, excellent. Good timing. So we're going to go back to 8.1, and this motion is already on the, well, there's no motion because it was a presentation, so we don't need to put a motion on the floor. So I'm wondering if we can do it two ways, Commissioner. We can ask Commissioner Blackburn to put her motion on the floor, and then we can have discussion, or if we want to just have a discussion on the presentation and ask questions before we get to that item, we can do that. So what would folks rather do? Motion on the floor, have discussion, or ask questions?
I can put the motion on the floor, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Get the conversation started. All right, so I move that the Board of Police Commissioners strike a subcommittee made up of up to 3 commissioners to review the recommendations of the Board of Police Commissioners Subcommittee to define defunding police report and determine the body responsible for their completion. I so move.
Second.
You, seconded by Commissioner Kent. Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kent. So I just sort of see this as the logical next step. We have this report. We've had about a month and a bit to digest it. I have spoken with Dr. Jones as well, and she is certainly very supportive of this next step in the process. I'm thinking that sort of three commissioners to begin with, and I think we need to sit down with those 36 recommendations and just determine exactly where responsibility for completing them will lie, because there are certainly some recommendations that we'll be able to do here at the Board of Police Commissioners. There are others that will require motions of council. So definitely the counselors on the commission here will be able to forward that piece of work, but we also have to recognize that there's a good chunk of recommendations there that is going to require the province to change how they are doing some things, and so we just need to get our bearings with these recommendations and determine who will be responsible for what, and then we can work on next steps from there. It's been suggested that perhaps an expanded subcommittee after that to include some members of the defining police report committee. They might be able to help us as well. But for now, I'm just looking for a motion to establish 3 commissioners on a subcommittee so that we can get the work of assigning who does what under our belts. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Blackburn, Commissioner Blackburn, for putting this on the floor. I'm sorry. I think this is a really, really important step, because I think one of the things that it has to be made clear, and I think this is where we're going with it, is that this report is a report of recommendations, and now as a board we have to unpack it and look at the recommendations came forward and evaluate who are the players that should be involved. Is this something that the board would entertain as being an appropriate next step? What's the input from any of the potential stakeholders that would be at play for each and every single recommendation, things like that. So I'm happy to support it. I think that this is important work for our municipality, and certainly for the residents that our policing services serve, and then all of the agents that could potentially be partners. One of the things that would have to be done, and I don't want to complicate this, but I think it's really important, is that to understand that this committee, I'm assuming, would have to have some terms of reference, I think, for us as a board, because 3 commissioners are only 3 brains that are at work on behalf of lots of other brain trusts that's here at this table. Would there be a part of that first conversation? Perhaps Councillor Blackburn or Commissioner Blackburn can speak to this for remarks, and Marty, maybe you can as well, around how do we go forward in a jurisdictional space to not set up unreasonable expectations for what the outcome would be at the very committee level. The committee would be having to do a lot of, I think, the dissecting of it, and then I'm assuming come back to the full commission to weigh in on that, and then the commission would then create the plan forward. It's not the committee that's going to actually do that. We have to be careful of expectations in that regard, not because, and yeah, it potentially is going to slow things down a little bit, but these are really, really important changes. We have the chance to reinvent the model of how we approach so many things in the community that we know we can do better on, and that there are incredible agents and other levels of government and all of that. But those things take time to put in place, and the board at the Board of Police Commissioners at the end of the day will own all of that. So I'm excited about these next steps, but I think we should go about it with our eyes wide open on how we do it in a way that's accountable, transparent, and is productive, most importantly. I'm not one for just jumping in 2 feet and hoping I swim. I want to know that all the bits and parts are there. There's the lifeguard, there's a life ring close. Maybe, there's someone beside me if I'm not a swimmer. It's probably a bad analogy, but yeah. So I just, if anyone could offer some comments on that, then I'm happy to support it, but I want to support something that I'm a little more aware of where we're going with it.
Thank you. I see, Marty, you got your hand up.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I think we don't want to repeat earlier things, and so I think that it's important what Commissioner Kent says. I think we need terms of reference for this. One of the options for the board might be to strike the committee, ask the committee to come back to the board with proposed terms of reference, and then the committee and then the board could decide if that's what they want. That would put a little more specificity around what the requirement is, right? So that's one option to do it. On the other hand, the board could decide the reference themselves, but as Commissioner Kent says, there's a lot of complexity to this, right? And so those are possibilities, but clearly there should be terms of reference without any question as a first step after striking a committee.
Sorry, just for clarity, when you say terms of reference, can you please draw a bit of explanation on that? What?
Marty, do you want to
Sure.
on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute there. Yeah, what we're talking about is we've got this broad topic. We have a report, right? And I guess what we're talking about in terms of reference would be directions to the subcommittee, this committee, of what the board wants them to do in terms of, do they want them to review the proposals, for example, that are in the report and come back and advise whether they're recommending to the board that the board adopt certain proposals, whether they're coming back and modifying some of those proposals, whether the board would like them to prioritize those proposals, whether the board would like them to consider additional proposals on their own. All of those kind of things would go into terms of reference for the subcommittee to report back to the board. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. It does.
And may I add, Marty, if you don't mind, just would there not be as well in there some sort of definitions of the implementation authority, that sort of stuff, so that it's clear that by working through this committee does not mean that it's then is the next step. It means that the board then decides on the full scope of it. Would that not normally go in there in some way? Yeah.
Well, that's an excellent point, because Commissioner, Blackburn recognizes that some of this is within the board's jurisdiction, and some of it is without the board's jurisdiction, and could constitute recommendations to council, or recommendations that council make recommendations to the Minister of Justice or cabinet or something, right? So yes, that certainly would be part of any report back to the board.
Any further comments, Commissioner Kent?
I would appreciate it. I don't know if Commissioner Blackburn wants to give us some insight on if or Dr. Jones, if she's present, if they want to give us some sense of what you've had that conversation around, what maybe this could look like. I feel like I'm kind of a little bit in the dark on that, which is be nice to hear about it. The last thing I'll say is that that we would have as well in those terms of reference, the report, a bit of a timeline on some of the reporting back. I think it's going to be really important that we continue as a full board, have the opportunity to get updates regularly on where things are, not just so we know, but so that we actually could be be supportive if there's any connections that the board might have that a committee might be struggling with partnerships and things like that. So a reporting plan as well. Thank you.
I wonder if Dr. Jones, if you wanted to comment on how you envision the work being undertaken to deal with the recommendations. If you want to comment, that'd be great.
Hello, yes. I can recap the conversation I had with Councillor Blackburn. So first of all, we talked about the importance of moving this work forward, that certainly there needs to be some timely interventions. One of the things that both board and council have expressed is the breadth of this work and how much it seems to be, and that people are struggling with this idea of making these budget decisions with all these other issues. So we were hoping, or I was hoping as well, that with this motion that Councillor Blackburn has made, that this might navigate some of those issues to clarify what can be done on what timelines when. So Councillor Kent, you're exactly correct that timelines are necessary here so that everything doesn't just keep sort of getting pushed off, but there's an action plan for what can be done. The other issue we did discuss is exactly, so you're raising all the issues really that we did discuss, the problems, or complications or complexities of those issues which involve multiple layers of government. So just determining what might, say if we prioritize mental health, for example, which I think is very doable. It's something that the public in general is concerned about. There are pilot projects in other cities. Toronto right now, for example, is piloting a project in 4 different areas of mental health without police involvement. But obviously health is a provincial responsibility as well, right? So if we wanted to look at how would that take place, it would be the subcommittee really looking at what might go into that, what would be the steps, what might be a timeline for determining that. So in my conversation with Councillor Blackburn, it was really to sort of determine a way to make a solid working plan for this so that it doesn't just seem like you have a budget here, you have a defunding report, how do you put them together and what happens, but saying, okay, these are issues that we could prioritize. We can prioritize this mental health program. This is how it might take place. This is who we would need to reach out to work with. This is what could be done, and then beginning to make those connections and do that work.
Thank you. Okay, next, Commissioner McDougall. Then Commissioner McDougall.
Thank you. I want to support, verbally support the motion before we vote on it. I think it's really critical that we follow up on all of these recommendations and determine how to proceed as the motion suggests. I'm also very happy that Commissioner Kent brought forward the comment about terms of reference, because I'm very cognizant of what happened when we first established this committee and asked Dr. Jones to chair it. And I think we thought we were moving along, but realized that without a terms of reference 2 or 3 months later, that really nothing could, in terms of our process, in terms of the way council moves forward, nothing could really advance, particularly when we suggested that there be a budget amount to help cover, non-waged participants, that kind of thing. So I think it's really critical that we do that and make sure that we understand. I also think there's another part of the terms of reference that includes the timeline, but some budget figures for the commission itself to commission some research, look at what's going on in other cities, as Dr. Jones just talked about, if, say, mental health was a priority. And I think there's a whole question of the timeline. It's some things feel very urgent to me, and others maybe have so many partners that it's going to take some time. But I'm really welcoming the idea of this getting started. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Dr. Jones.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that there also are a number of items that the board can do on its own. So there are obviously more complex items, mental health, the housing issue. Obviously, we know that people have been, that has been an issue for the past year in particular. But there are other issues that the board can do on its own. So I just also wanted to highlight that as well. So a disarm review, use of force review, participatory budgeting comes straight from the board, not funding body cameras, etc. So some of these also take place at the board level and perhaps with participation of council as well. So I also wanted to just emphasize that while there are ones that are more long-term and complex, there also are shorter recommendations. So if a work plan, and when a work plan is being developed, I just also think that's easy to highlight and say, these are the things that are under the purview of the board itself. And these are the things that require perhaps a more complex approach. And that may also help in sorting through the responsibilities as well. So sorry, I just wanted to add that. I should have said that in my initial comments.
No, thank you. Commissioner Ndojo.
Thank you very much. I also want to clearly state that I agree with, before we vote, the proposal on ground, but just in line with the reference on, just to enable us follow this judiciously, I think Ward just mentioned the fact that within the recommendation, there would be some items within jurisdiction for the board, and there will be items outside the jurisdiction of the board. I think the subcommittee should be referenced to, first of all, identify what is within the board's jurisdiction and what is outside the board's jurisdiction. And further, whatever is outside the board's jurisdiction, the subcommittee should allocate who is responsible. So that will give us a good start. You know, we are able to deal with the ones we can deal with, and then identify who, in form of a suggestion to the board, who is responsible for the ones out of our jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else for first round? What I'm going to do, if you have something to follow up on Commissioner Akindojo's comments, Commissioner Kent, I'm going to do first round and then go to the chiefs who want to comment, and then come back for second round. So if you have a follow-up, I'm more than happy to go now if you want to. If you have a follow-up.
No, I'd just like to add something in, but I can wait for the chief. Okay,
great. So before we hear from the chiefs, I want to just speak really quickly because I don't see anybody else. I should put your name on the list first, Commissioner Kent, so I don't forget. Again, I support the report wholeheartedly. I think there's lots of work to be done, and I think the willingness is there as well on many ends, not just us as a commission, but the community. I know our police forces are interested in supporting the work as well. So really, it's going to come down to how we understand the responsibilities, because as mentioned by Ms. Jones, there's some that we have direct responsibility on and we should take on in a timely manner. There's others that we're going to have to rely on our other partners to support that. So looking at an approach where we figure this out is important. My only concern is how we do this. And what I mean by that is if we're creating another subcommittee, which could be what we're doing, or if we're creating a working group, how do we resource it in a sense? And I mean like resource it with bodies that can do this work, because it's gonna take time. And many of the folks that we are going to rely on are all working very busy within their world. So I do get concerned on how we can make this efficient in timely, because, and this is a conversation that we've had in the past, and even the commission itself, we don't have direct resources other than ourselves to support work outside of board meetings and whatnot, because research is going to probably need to be done to expand on some of the recommendations, further information on how other cities have done these things are going to need more information, or further information, which we can't continue to rely on volunteers. We can, but I just don't know how that will make things happen in a timely manner. So that is a concern that we can address when we start talking terms of reference and timelines of what we need to do to make sure that resources are available to make this happen. Other than that, I think I'm not going to go into recommendations one by one right now. But what I do want to just highlight in Dr. Siciliano's here, I like to just talk a little bit, and I'm putting you on the spot, and I haven't asked you ahead of time, wondering if you can speak a little bit around how the report, the fund report, relates to our public safety strategy, which will be coming up for, I guess, a revamp, renewal, whatever we want to call it, in the very near future. So before I go to the chiefs, I'm just wondering, Dr. Siciliano, if you can speak a little bit about how aspects of this report relate to our public safety strategies that we currently have.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Chair Smith. So back in June 2021, Regional Council approved a direction for the renewal of the public safety strategy, which included in the work plan involvement of the defunding committee, and specifically the report that came out of it. So at that time, we didn't know when it was coming or what it was going to look like. And now that we have it in hand, we've invited a couple of members of that committee, including Dr. Jones, to participate in an early discussion to look at how we can link the renewal of the public safety strategy with some of the recommendations that came out of the defunding report. So the work hasn't started yet, but it's about to kick off this week. And so I can have more of an update for you, perhaps at the next meeting, when we know how it's going to proceed. But we have a consultant engaged to support the work. We have a preliminary plan to do it, and excuse me, I'm losing my words here. We hope to have it finished by the end of around the fall. So have something ready for council's review by fall, end of fall this year.
Thank you. And you just said something that sparked a thought, and I wonder, and I just say a question: does the commission need to have a consultant maybe support this work? Which that might be the case. Anyway, that was just a good a thought that you just raised for me, and that's something that we should take back as we have discussions, because we might need that. We might need that external person to be thinking about this every day, while we just support some of the findings. Anyway, I'm thinking out loud. Moving on to, before I go to second round for members, I'm just going to ask if the chiefs can weigh in on their comments and thoughts and questions they may have related to the report. And I'll start with RCMP. If you wanna, yeah, just give you the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. And as I mentioned, I think in one of our previous BOPC meetings, we have a group that we've stood up here with the RCMP, and we're actually actively going through each of the recommendations. We're actually very interested in that report, and as I referenced with council, some of the future moves that we would like to intend on making are going to obviously use the report as as a guiding document towards those. But I would be speaking prematurely if I got into any great specifics in terms of some of our views at this point in time. Other than I appreciate the report, and as I stated before, we're certainly listening.
Thank you. Chief Costello.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to the Commission. Very much appreciate it. And we too are going through the report. Lots to digest there. Lots of things certainly that make sense for the future of policing, and other things that I think bear some discussion and talking through. For me, it really comes down to three things, and Commissioner Blackburn and Akindojo both hit the nail on the head, I think. And if we take a cue from Wortley and our approach to that, I really think it comes down to responsibility, roles, and resources. And how are we going to get to where we need to get to with the recommendations that are there? Who's going to look after what? Who's responsible for what? And, is it the Department of Justice? Is it the Board of Police Commissioners? Is it a combination of other stakeholders? How do the HRP, the RCMP act as resources for the report and the recommendations? Certainly listening to and working with the community on many levels and across all boards. And who has what role? Can we track it? Can we get ahead of it? And I think both commissioners spoke to that, and very important that we do that work early on. And that certainly will set us up for success as we move forward. Thank you.
So I'm going to go to second round of discussion, starting with Commissioner Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chiefs. I think that you just brought, a really important piece to this conversation, in that, your teams, which rightly so, and I appreciate hearing that you're both already ahead of the game with reviewing this and having, it sounds like already a space of commitment to making change, which is really great to hear. What's going to be really important here for you both to, I think, consider, and for anyone on the committee and Dr. Jones and whoever's involved, is that we need to work in concert with each other. We cannot pull this out in silos. That's exactly what this report really says, is that this is not a one agency solution to change and path forward. And we have to, and so when I spoke to making sure that the board is aware of where this committee work is going, equally so is that dialogue between that committee and the chief, so we all know what's happening, whether it's from an RCMP perspective or a HRP perspective, because what we want to do is create a solid unified approach here. I think at the municipality we have two police forces that sometimes one's doing something and we either want to emulate it or copy it or get in on it. We need to have you both talking to each other as well. I think that's one of the benefits of this as well, is that we're going to be having this dialogue with so many layers of what could be providing better service to our residents who need this kind of approach. So I really hope that you'll wrap your heads around how to do that as we go forward. The last piece that I want to speak to is the importance of, and I think it was Commissioner, I can't remember your name, sorry, Yemi, Commissioner Yemi, I'm just going to keep it that way, that identifying jurisdiction.
Just call me sweet, yum yum.
Okay. No, I think I will not today. Not on that. Let's leave. Remember, we're on television or on YouTube. Is that our jurisdiction and our mandates absolutely are a really important piece here. But if we're going to reinvent or remodel, create a new way forward, we can't absolve ourselves from a role in any of the future conversations we have with other levels of government or community perspectives, jurisdictions. So I really, really hope that as we go forward, we will see our role as the commissioners still at every one of those tables. We have a duty, I believe, to be representative and be leaders on this. We commissioned this report. We are saying we want to find a way forward, even if it's not in our jurisdiction. Obviously, Marty's probably thinking, well, we can't go outside. We only have legislative authority for certain things and stuff, and rightly so. But every single one of us has a voice. Every single one of us who's on this commission has I believe, a responsibility to be an advocate for the things that we as a group and we as a commission decide to endorse. And so even if it's not, if we're building putting together a table around a dialogue with the province or with community agents, our commission needs to have a voice at that table, because at the end of the day, this is our initiative. And I just don't want us to lose, and anyone out there to think that because we may identify that, obviously we can identify that mental health services and public health services and different things are mandates of the province. We know they're still our citizens. We know we're championing for change. We need to be at those tables, even though it may not be within our specific mandate. So, and whether or not that's anything beyond being a champion, only time will tell, because the whole idea is that maybe some models can change, maybe some service delivery changes have to happen. So I hope that makes sense to you. I don't want to lose sight of, even though it's not our mandate, we should still be part of that change at those tables. Hope that helps. I look forward to some really great work happening. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner McDougall.
Thank you. I just wanted to suggest too that we come up with a name that doesn't, or that makes it clear what this committee working group is, as opposed to, because we ended up with the name of a subcommittee to define defunding police, and now we're coming up with a subcommittee to respond to. So just something to make it really clear what this group is going to be doing, and differentiates from the original subcommittee.
Good point. Again, thinking out loud, it almost makes me feel like we could have a working group that we use to support work of the commission. And right now we're focusing on the defund report, but maybe the working group could be for the police commissioners working group, which then gets delegated work on reports or work that we're trying to do, or community. I'm not exactly sure, but I think you're right. Having it not just under that frame, but understanding that that is what we want them to do. So that's a good point, and we'll leave that as we move forward. Dr. Jones.
Sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute button. I just wanted to say that I'm very gratified to see the interest in moving forward. And I do want to remind us that there are many urgencies to this work. Some things are life and death. Last week in Calgary, a Black man, and I know that's not our jurisdiction, but a Black man named Natjo Tuel was shot to death while waiting for a bus, experiencing a mental health crisis. And that community is talking about how that can be prevented. And that shows the urgency of mental health services. It doesn't just dwell in one place. I'm not putting that all on one institution, but I'm saying that there is a chance here to do the kind of work that prevents that from happening, that is very work that is in our hands and that we can do. So I just want to remind us of that. This weekend, we know that the building of a kitchen, the lumber was confiscated from unhoused people. And I know that you might have different perspectives on that. I'm not jumping into that, but I'm saying that we see the human urgency around these issues, that when the name of the committee does not matter as much as the fact that people are living in tents, people are living without food, every time there's a mental health call, there is a risk of people dying as a result. So I just really want to encourage you, yes, we need to do this work carefully. Of course, it needs to be thoughtful. Of course, you do not make solid social policy by rushing ahead and doing things for the moment. But also, I just do encourage you, as a member of the board that has a strong responsibility and ability here to really take that on. I just really want to encourage you to be courageous here. When I was on the decriminalization federal task force, we were doing a lot of discussion on, like terms and threshold limits. And Harold, who recently passed, a Cree man from Winnipeg, said, people are dying. This is an overdose crisis, and we are here to stop this from happening. And I do think that there are many urgencies that we can take on. So I really encourage people, when we're doing the report, we didn't do it all by ourselves. There are researchers out here, people that we cite in our report that I'm sure would be willing to provide research if that takes down some of the labor and some of the concerns about research, that some of it is in our report. Certainly those people could be relied upon. Dr. Jamie Kennedy, Livingston, sorry, Dr. Jamie, I don't know, I always call him Kennedy. Dr. Jamie Livingston, has been very present at all of these meetings at council, at the board. He is a strong expert in mental health. I'm sure he could be tapped to perhaps create a plan there. So I also encourage you that while I do think a consultant and staff member would be extremely helpful in this work, that there are many people within the service industry, within academia, with lived experience that certainly I think would be very willing to provide that experience if it meant the difference between people being out in the cold or people facing a call without treatment. So I'm happy also to continue to provide some of the names, some of the research we relied on, people that we look to guide us. So I just don't want the work to seem overwhelming in that sense. I think one of the things we wanted to show in the report is it is doable. It seems so huge, but there are very, very doable steps, things that are very concrete and that can be put into being. So I just really encourage us all to do that work with force and courage. Thank you.
So thank you. And that really goes to the point of this work is bigger than just the defining the police committee. Like the work that we're talking about has a bigger community impact. And that's why I'm thinking like this, whatever comes out of depending what the work plan in terms of reference is one thing, but this group of individuals could really focus on what are the systematic changes that we have within our powers as Board of Police Commissioners to do now. Anyway, thank you for highlighting that. Commissioner Akindoji.
Thank you very much for the time. I'm still learning democratically how to follow through this process. Mm-hmm. But to bring in the private sector type of view, we want to act on things once and for all and not waste too much time. I think the recommendations have been made. The suggestion by Councillor Lisa Blackburn is totally acceptable by all of us. What we need to do now is how to act on this. And thank you, Chair, for allowing us to hear from the police that they have started working on this. So what we do not want is everybody working on the same document. We want a concession of mind. What I would suggest is that it is clear that we can only work on what we have jurisdictions on. And we can allocate the ones we do not have jurisdictions on. The issue, therefore, is who's to do this. My suggestion will therefore be, there's the authors. I would say Dr. Ellie Jones is one of the authors of this recommendation. They're the people that are involved, the police. We, as the board, let's form a small group immediately, as suggested by Lisa, to proceed and work on the action point. What do we have jurisdiction on? What do we not have jurisdiction on? If we do not have jurisdiction, who does? Those are clear points that they can start to work on. And I agree with Dr. Jones, that time is of essence. The earlier we move on to this, the better it is for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. My recommendation was going to be, and then I'm going to go to Commissioner Blackburn to close, was that we add to the motion, and the wording can be changed, but return back to the Board of Police Commissioners with terms of reference in a work plan for the committee at the next meeting. because right now we all agree that work needs to be done sooner than later. We all agree that there's a need of terms of reference, but we also need to kind of put some timelines on it. So I'm just wondering if folks are interested for us to add that last sentence for us to come back at our next meeting in terms of reference in I guess a draft work plan.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I don't know if that is going to be enough time, because we're going to have to send out an email to recruit members for this working group, and then to draft a terms of reference. Not sure if we'd be able to complete that before the March meeting, given that March break is in there, and some folks maybe, yeah. So thinking maybe, yeah, more towards the April. And, you know, maybe if I could just clarify what it is that I'm looking for. I don't see this working group as a long-standing, like a standing committee. I see this working group as doing maybe 3 or 4 meetings and coming up with a document that basically has each one of the recommendations. Recommendation 1. Here it is, and here are the bodies that are responsible for accomplishing that. Here's the second recommendation. Here are the bodies that are responsible. If it's somebody, you know, say if it's somebody outside of our purview, then, you know, maybe a little note saying, okay, how can we move forward on this, even though responsibility rests with the province. I just sort of see this working group as taking care of some of the preliminary administrative issues. The heavy lifting and the hard work is definitely going to be done at this greater Board of Commission level. You know, I don't see this working group as coming up with a whole slew of motions for us to pass a Board of Police Commission. As Councillor Kent has pointed out, or Commissioner Kent rather, you know, we can't do this work in a silo. So we're just basically chunking it down into smaller pieces that we can work on, you know, systematically one by one. But this is just sort of the preliminary working group to assess the recommendations and basically list out where the responsibility lays.
Well, thank you for that, Commissioner. So could we still add that we'll return back to the board with the terms of reference at a future meeting? Would that be friendly then?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I consider it a friendly amendment.
It's got a motion. I'll just read. The Board of Police Commissioners strike a subcommittee made up of 3 commissioners to review recommendations of the Board of Police Commissioners subcommittee to define the funding police report and determine the body responsible for the completion and return to a future BOPC meeting with a draft terms of reference and work plan. Marty.
Chair, I just wanted to add this so the commissioners know. It's important, I think, that the commissioners own this now, right? And that's really important from a jurisdictional perspective. And so I think a subcommittee or a working group of commissioners can certainly consult as many people as they need to in an advisory capacity, right? But ultimately, we've taken this one step forward where it's now in the commission's hands, so to speak, you know. So we have to be careful that we're not delegating that responsibility. We're really just resourcing other people to inform the commissioners at this point, right?
No, good point. Good point. So before we vote on this, what I'll just say is I'll commit to, with my hardly any time to eat calendar, to support trying to get something in terms of reference for our March meeting. It might not happen, but I'm committing publicly that I'll work with whoever is ready to try to get at least that aspect done, so we can know what our focus will be and have that discussion for our March meeting. We might not get to it, but I'm saying now publicly on the record that I'll put my hand up to say I'll work to try to get that, because I think the terms of reference is in Ms. Jones said this, the terms of reference and the work plans and whatnot. Sure, that's one thing, and that's really just for our security, but it's the work and the urgency of the actual items within this report that need to be done now. And we can't allow our governmentees to overshadow the urgency of some of these issues. So really support the discussion. Thank you, Ms. Jones, and all the team that was under, and I should say under beside you, supporting this work. And yeah, I don't know if you want to have a final comment before we call for the question.
Yes, just in final comment, I will say that the recommendations do also say often police board should or council should. So there is some specificity to the recommendations that may be helpful also in shaping the work plan and moving that forward as well. So as much as possible, we did identify what those spheres of responsibility are. So hopefully that is helpful also in streamlining some of this work. But thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing this work progress. I know that, there's people are supporting that, we know that there are many changes that can come. Obviously not everybody supports everything, and that's normal. Like, we live in a democracy, that is fine. But there are also, I think, many items that people can take leadership on that will make a big change. So I'm very looking forward to seeing that work take place. And I can offer my support wherever it is necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, call for the question.
Chair, just before we go there, one of the things, I don't know if you've thought about this, whether the board wants to identify the commissioners who would be on this working group or committee and ask them to come up with terms of reference, proposed terms of reference, or whether you want to handle that separately. I don't know. Did you suggest that you might do that yourself? I wasn't quite sure coming off that.
Well, what we can do is I'll work with the commissioners offline and just to kind of get an idea of who's interested, because it might take a little bit more discussion of who has what going on. But yeah, if folks don't mind us doing that offline, just to kind of get of interest of who wants to do that, that would be my approach. We can have discussion today and put names forward, but I would much rather us take that offline and kind of figure it out. Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question for Mr. Ward. I'm just wondering, and my apologies to Commissioner Critchley. I hate to drag you into this, but I'm just wondering, will Commissioner Critchley be able to volunteer his time to this working group? Because I do think that he would have incredibly valuable insight and certainly could bring a lot to the working group. Speaking completely out of turn, Councillor Critchley, I'm sorry, because I don't know what else you got going on in your world, but I just wanted that clarification before we move forward. Thank you.
Well, what I think is that I don't think that at this point that that Commissioner Critchley could be a member of the working group as a group of commissioners, but I do think that he could be used as a resource in the same way that Dr. Jones could be used as a resource to inform the committee, right, and answer questions and provide their perspective on it as members of that subcommittee that advised, that prepared the report at this point.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. All right, call for the question.
Question.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Thank you. That passes. I'm wondering if really quickly, if we could just take a 4-minute break. I just need to get a drink of water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Ms. Jones, for being here. And yeah, we'll come back in a couple minutes. We'll come back at 2 o'clock.
Am I finished? Can I go?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is now 2 o'clock. We'll be taking down the holding screen and returning microphones and cameras. Chair Smith, the meeting can call back to order.
All right, sounds good. I'll just wait until I see folks on the screen, just so I know. All right, yeah, cool, cool. Yep, all right, got cool on screen. All right, yep. So, moving on to correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Correspondence. Any correspondence, clerk?
Yes, Chair Smith, general correspondence was received by the clerk's office and circulated to the commission.
Thank you very much. 9.2 petitions. Are there any petitions from members? No. Presentations. We did have a presentation 9.3.1, policing and family violence against men. Our presenter isn't able to join us today, but we hope to reschedule that in a future meeting. We already did 11.1.1, Halifax Regional Police Board defined fiscal update. Moving on to 11.1.2, Halifax Regional Police Strategic Plan update. I'll pass it off to Chief Costello.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to the commission. There was a report submitted along with the package in advance of today's meeting. And just very quickly, by way of a quick background update, HRP's 10-year strategic plan was launched in 2015. In 2018, the plan underwent a refresh with the themes partnerships, evidence-based practices, and continuous improvement at the heart of the refresh process. The refresh process identified 3 key areas. Each of the current 2021-2022 strat plan initiatives is aligned with one or more of the key areas, including crime reduction and improved quality of life, safe communities and partnerships, and effective and innovative police services. We have added an extra column at the request of the commission. So what you see is the Q2 and Q3 results. We're hoping to have a refresh again of the plan. It's in need at some point this year. And now that we're headed in the right direction in regards to COVID, we believe we'll be able to schedule that probably in the fall of this year. And that's my update, subject to any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair Smith. A couple of questions, Chief. Thank you for providing the update. The first question I had was, it's great to hear that there's going to be another refresh of the strategic plan. What role do you think the board could play in that update of the strategic plan? Would there be a, sorry to interrupt you, but to say that would you book a session in the fall where people would get together and have discussions about these sorts of things, or?
Well, certainly we haven't got the format set out yet, and what I would be requesting at a future meeting is certainly, and through you, Chair, through to the Commissioner, is to see what interest and what role the Commission believes they would like to play in that process. I think it's important that we continue to have dialogue and solicit the input of the Commission. So I would say more discussion to come on that.
Okay, thank you so much. And I just wondered as well about the review of the patrol deployment model, and just wondered about that and the interface between that and some of the information we've received in recent meetings as it related to understaffing and in various areas. So are those things related to one another, the review of the patrol deployment model?
They're not currently related, through you, Chair, to the Commissioner. The review of the patrol deployment model is not directly related to the recent budget ask.
Okay, could you say a few words then of what will the review, so I see it says evaluate current model of patrol deployment to ensure optimization. Do you mind just saying a few more words about sort of what that means, or what the goal of the review would be?
Well, certainly it comes down to effective and efficient policing and how are we deploying our resources, not only geographically, but by calls for service and how busy the various regions or the geographical areas are within the city. You may know that we are coming to the end of our priority response review model, and that will inform the deployment review. Once we see where the calls are all realigned and, we've broken out the assist citizen and all of those kind of things. So that's really what we're going to be looking at. And I've mentioned before to the Commission, this is not a quick turnaround. There's a lot of research that has to be done, a lot of checking calls for service. Do we have the right amount of officers in the right area? All of those kind of things. So it has more to do with how we deploy versus how many we deploy.
Okay, thank you. And just as to the priority response, that I've asked you about this before, but so that's also related to the Perivale and Taylor report, the concern about, as you just mentioned, the breaking up this as citizen category. So will the end result of that be a new list of codes? Will that be one sort of deliverable of the review? Or?
So one component of it, certainly, and there's numerous components, and once we get to the end of it, I'll have more for the commission, is to look at, the categorization of calls from a priority standpoint, priority 1, 2, 3, from a citizen and break out of all the other calls to make sure we're tracking them. Hate crime is one of those. And we've talked a little bit about that over the past budget cycle. We have to make sure that we're capturing the right calls in the right areas so we can track them, and then so we can respond to the appropriate areas. So we expect that to come out of the priority response review. Again, it is tied into Perivale and Taylor, as you mentioned, and we're just waiting for the final results of that report. And then that in turn will help us move forward with the deployment review.
And that report is being prepared internally, or is there a consultant that's been brought on to assist with that, or a bit of both? Or?
It's an internal report, Commissioner, that's currently being conducted through various stakeholders and internally, though. It's an internal report right now. At some point in time, I will bring the results, and I know you've asked for them. I will bring the results forward to the commission to continue the dialogue at that governance level.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that's all from Commissioner. That's all from you, Commissioner Blackburn, right? Nothing on this item? You're in the chat.
No, nothing on this.
Okay.
Thank you. That was from the previous. Thank you.
Yep. Commissioner Kent?
Yeah, thank you. We're on 12.1.2, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Chief, under in your spreadsheet here, or I guess it's a chart, performance excellence training. Can you remind me what that is? And then
Sorry.
And then I may have a follow-up to that.
Okay, no problem. So through you, Chair, to the Commissioner. So performance excellence training is led through HRM. It is, basically the study of doing things, better, more efficient, cutting out red tape, those kind of things. We're on course to have a number of our members trained. And we got waylaid a little bit by COVID, but we're certainly committed to the program. We see great value in it. And we're just waiting for the training to ramp up again, and then we'll continue our participation. And it has to do with doing things more efficiently, ensuring that, all of our projects are properly led and those kind of things. I can get more information on it for you if required, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, I don't need any more information. I was just trying to get a sense of why it would be starting with senior officers. And so that's all. I think that makes sense now, why it would start there, because that's often where the initial planning starts, right? So, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, and just one more point on that, Commissioner, because I think it's an important one to you, and you've just identified it. Primarily, the senior team are doing the larger projects, bringing in other team members to help assist and develop them along the way as well. So, there's quite a bit to it, but it's a good program.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't see anybody else with questions, so I'm going to go really quickly. So two questions, Chief. One is related to the community survey. And I know we had this discussion last time. We talked about the strategic plan. Are you waiting for us to support this to help move this item forward? Because I know it was something that we were hoping to do sooner than later, but obviously there's lots of competing priorities happening. But I do remember that was an item. The other one is also just looking at the figures in terms of progress, which there hasn't been much movement on many of the categories. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that as well. Is that due to competing interests? Is that due to resourcing? Is that can just really give an idea of why there's not much progress being seen on the chart?
So thanks, Chair, and through you to the commission. So on the first part around the community survey, the short answer is yes. We've had a number of conversations. I've done a number of updates along the way, and it will require further discussion and input from the board on the format. How does that look? We did get waylaid a little bit by COVID because we talked about involving the community and focus groups and those kind of things. So the other piece is how does HRP, RCMP, and the board work together to make sure we get the information we're looking for. But our last discussion was at the board level, and it is sitting at that particular point now. The other piece around the increments of progression. So it's just about, it's a combination of many things. The things that you mentioned, we've had competing priorities. Some of them are related to funding. We recently got funding, for example, for the HRP Secure Online Communications Portal. That was 2 years in the requesting. So that is sat for some time. We expect some movement on that in the near future. The HRP technology roadmap is quite involved and quite extensive, again, involving funding and the procurement of equipment and software and those kind of things. So and I won't go into the street checks report, but we have things that are challenging us in that area, and the bulk of them are not real quick turnaround items. They are things that take time. I mentioned just a minute ago about the deployment survey or the redeployment examination of how we deploy our officers. That's going to take some time as well. So it is a combination of a number of challenges that we faced along the way, not the least of which is COVID, but certainly that's not the only reason. There are a number of issues that make the wheels grind a little bit slow.
Okay, thank you. So before I go to Commissioner McDougall, commissioners, I'm wondering, because I think we should, if there's aspect of the community survey that's relying on us, I think we could try to move that forward a little bit. So I'm just wondering if there's any commissioners who are interested in being part of those discussions. I know I was part, anyway, if anyone just want to write in the chat that they're interested in carrying on those discussions, and we'll try to make sure that anything that's needed on our end will do. So if you're interested in supporting that work, just write your name in the chat and we'll figure that out. All right, cool. All right, thank you, Commissioner McDougall.
Thank you. Actually, my question was about the community survey. I recall at one time, the board was asked to give input to questions, but also to commit some funds to the project itself. And I just wondered if you were expecting that the board would commit money to implement the survey when it's time to do that. I know a lot of delays through COVID and that sort of thing. The plan to bring people together, that didn't work. Town halls. Anyway, to be at this point, and it would be good for us to know if there's an expectation that we would contribute financially to it.
Thanks, Commissioner, and through you, Chair. So MQO has the RFP. You may recall we went out to RFP and MQO was awarded the contract. So to your point of funding, we're going to need to see where we get the funds from and who is going to contribute to that. You may know that depending on what kind of survey you're looking for and how involved it is and how expansive it is, they can cost more money. We had done some preliminary work early on with MQO, and there was some early discussion about funding. But to your point, we would certainly need some assistance either from the board or otherwise to see where we would go with funding any survey that would be conducted.
Thank you, Chief. So I'll reach out and with some other members, and we'll carry those discussions on to help move that item forward. All right. So just going back to my agenda here, there's no motion needed on 11.1.2. So moving on to 11.1.3, which is Halifax Regional Police and Halifax District Royal Canadian Mounted Police in crime statistics. So I'll actually go to Halifax District Royal Canadian Mounted Police to start the conversation off and then come back to HRP. Give you a little break, Chief.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I thought you were going to HRP first, but that's fine. So just very quickly, I provided to the Board of Police Commissioners an overview of stats for the period of time that was requested. And some general comments. Is this the one slide that you have only, or do you have two slides there, Chair?
We do have two.
All right, so if you can go back to the first one for me, please. Just a few general comments. First, just to speak, very briefly in terms of COVID-19 and the restrictions and what we believe may have had some impact on the general crime stats for Halifax District, specifically within 2020. And in terms of 2020, when we saw COVID-19 and the restrictions brought upon the province, we did see an overall decrease in numbers for that particular year. So when we compare the second half of each year, the total criminal code decreased by 4.66% from 2019 to 2020, and continued to decrease at 1.29% from 20 to 21. So in terms of comparing calendar years themselves, total criminal code decreased at 6.63% for that year. And in 2019 and 2020, there was only an increase of 4.87% of total criminal code cases when comparing 2019 to 2021, which presents a more relative comparison. So when you look at 2020 and 2021, total criminal code increased by 12.3%. And we believe that's most likely due to the opening up and easing of restrictions. So we're seeing that in terms of our statistics. When we look into breaking down the actual stats in terms of some of the crime types, violent crime, so assaults at all levels account for just over 96% of our total violent crime. In the second half of 2021, assaults trended upwards since 2019, and they contribute to the overall increase of 6.03% in the total violent crime for 2021. In terms of attempted murders, they increased by 5 in the second half of 2021. And again, back to that easing of restrictions, we do see some trends in terms of some of our criminal cases increasing after those easing of restrictions. The number that I provided in terms of the attempted murders also include one conspiracy to commit murder, which was also an attempt. There was a definite increase in gun violence in Halifax District for the second half of 2021, and that pertained mainly to Cole Harbour District. Over to property crimes, 57.6% of our total property crime was all within the theft under category, or theft under $5,000. And that was within the second half of 2021. There was a decrease in almost all property crime categories over 2020, again, back to some of the restrictions placed on COVID. And then we believe also some of the contributing factors were modified business hours and the fact that a lot of people were actually working from home. With the easing of restrictions in 2021, we saw property crimes increase by almost 30%, 29.19%. for the second half of 2021. And again, back to the fact that the restrictions seem to be increasing and people are getting back to what we might consider to be a little bit more normal. Now, however, I presented those numbers, they remain consistent with the pre-COVID reporting. Overall, the frauds have steadily increased since 2019 from that period of time, with a 24.14% increase from 2020 to 2021. And we're seeing a spike in terms of online shopping, theft and use of, or fraudulent use of credit cards. They've also played a significant role in contributing to those increases. Over to other criminal code offenses. Offensive weapons and morals combined consistently make up around 2.4% of the other criminal code cases over the second half of all 3 years, which is fairly insignificant. And then over on the other criminal code, they remain relatively consistent over those 3-year periods of time. So in terms of this slide that you're seeing here, obviously we're looking at 2019, 20, and 21. A couple of points I would, or items I would just point out for you. When we look at robberies, our percentage change from 20 to 21, we're down 33.33% on our robberies. And of course, on all other cases, our decrease is 42.86%. Now, these are the persons crimes. Over on the property crime, there's nothing more significant to report there, other than, as I mentioned before, the increase of 83.33% over last year over on the theft over under 5,000 category. And then when we look at offensive weapons, very slight decrease of 4%. Over 2020 to 2021. And then when we look at, I'll move down towards some of the criminal traffic statistics. We're looking at the overall criminal code cases, a decrease of 19%. However, we're seeing some of our collisions increasing at a very marginal rate at 2.44%. But again, a significant increase, which I would point out, would be over on our traffic fatalities in terms of that percentage of 133.33%. And injuries are up as well. If you move over to the next slide. I noticed that it looks like my mute action. How long, at what point did I stop transmitting our audio?
On my screen, it's just when you said next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, perfect. So I did say next slide. Thank you so much for that. So this next slide, what you're looking at is very specific in terms of our changes over the last year. Again, we're down in terms of homicides by a third. Our attempted murders are up by 125% from 4 to 9 cases in the last year. We're down 5% or almost 6% in terms of our robberies. Assaults are up slightly by almost 4%. And of course, all other cases down by 26.67%. Again, as I mentioned before, property crimes, they're trending upwards. Specifically, as I mentioned before, the theft over 5,000 or over 5,000, as well as theft under 5,000. And then when you look at some of those other cases that I mentioned before, fatalities over on the traffic criminal fatalities, 80%. We went up from 5 from 2020 to 9 in 2021. As I mentioned previously on the to council, we do target in terms of our traffic enforcement those 4 causal factors for serious injury, motor vehicle or fatal collisions, which would include things like distracted driving, excessive speed, as well as impaired operations of motor vehicles. If you can go to the next slide, please. You should have one last. Perhaps we don't have another one.
Yeah, this is all I got. This is 2.
This is all we got in our package, yeah.
All right, so just a couple last quick points then before I turn it over to Chief Kinsella. In terms of our overall percentage of cases or criminal cases across the RCMP Halifax district, Lower Sackville detachment represents almost 40% of our criminal code cases, followed by Cole Harbour at 26.6% of our criminal code cases. And then within the third place is Tantallon at 22.6. We do see Musquodoboit Harbour that represents 6.5% of those overall cases. And then North Central and Sheet Harbour and Musquodoboit are fairly small in terms of percentages at 6.5, as I mentioned before, for Musquodoboit, North Central at 2.5, and Sheet Harbour at 2.1%. Unless there's any questions, from the Halifax District RCMP in terms of stats. I'm certainly prepared to take those.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll go to questions from you and then move on to HRP. And first is Commissioner Christie.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you, Superintendent Campbell, for the presentation and for the statistics. I have a question in regard to the other criminal code heading. I'm assuming, is that primarily administration of justice offenses, or what gets grouped under that?
So, under the other, when you're talking about like under persons, all others?
No, sorry, under criminal other, there's morals, offensive weapon, other criminal code.
So under other criminal code would be everything outside of, for example, morals, which would be some of the sexual offenses and weapons offenses. Other criminal code would be, there could be threats, other threats files within that category. Property crimes would also include things like mischiefs. However, I believe that some of those smaller or less persons-driven cases, mischiefs would be within other criminal code as well. Anything that's not caught within those primary categories.
So, sorry, maybe to be a bit more direct, Superintendent Campbell, what percentage of that, if you have the information available to you, within that, because it's quite a sizable category, I think, you know, it accounts for 38% of all the criminal code charges. So my question would be, of that other criminal code line item, what percentage of that would be administration of justice offenses?
So you're talking about breaches, etc.
Yeah.
I don't have that number, Commissioner Critchley, available to me, but what I can do is I can actually take that back to our statistician. I can actually have that broken down and provide that to the Board of Police Commissioners so you can have a better understanding of it. I wish I had that with me now. Unfortunately, I don't have that exact number for you. But I do understand where you're going with it in terms of the breaches, and I can get that number and provide that to the board.
Great, thank you. And I will just say that I'm happy to have a discussion about it at a later date. My reason for asking is, as you're likely to know, breaches account for a very, very sizable percentage of all the charges that move through the justice system. Nova Scotia has one of the highest rates of pretrial detention in the country. And right now there's serious, as someone who worked knows the corrections quite well, right? There's serious concerns right now as in the correctional system, particularly as it relates to COVID and the transmissibility of COVID. So what I'm interested to know is on a year-over-year basis, are administration of justice offenses going up? Are they going down? Particularly where since 2019, there's now, as I'm sure you're well aware, the power under 496 for police to refer to judicial referral hearings and to avoid the addition of an additional administration of justice offense. So I guess what you'd hope to see is with a new diversionary power like that they would go down. But obviously it'd have to be borne out in the statistics. So.
Yeah, and thanks for those comments and through your chair for that, Commissioner Critchley. Yes, I do agree. I do recall several conversations early into COVID-19 in terms of those breach charges specifically, and I would agree with you in terms of a high percentage of those administration of justice charges. I know that there's a lot of groups, working groups right now, one of which I sat on for a number of years in terms of modernization of the administration of justice charges across the country. So I'd be more than happy to have some one-on-one discussions with you specifically about that. I look forward to that.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just to follow up on that, one of my questions too, not being so engulfed in that world as Commissioner Critchley, I was wondering what the other criminal code did. It did pose a significant amount. So happy to hear that you'll provide that information to us. I was also, when you answered my other question, one of my other questions, I was wondering if assaults under persons also captured domestic, but so you're saying domestic would fall under the criminal other?
So domestics actually fall under the assault cases.
Okay.
Under assaults as well, and I actually had asked our statistician to provide me with a little more detail. I had a specific question about whether or not sexual assaults were combined within those assault statistics, and they are. So, for example, Chair, and through the board or through you, when we compare the last 3 calendar years, sexual assaults remain relatively the same. They account for approximately 20.8% of the total assaults on average. And sexual assaults and sexual interference make up almost 86% of the 92 total sexual assaults from July to December of 2021. So those sexual assault numbers are included within those common assault numbers, and you would find those domestic assaults within that category as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the clarification on that. And then the last one related to property theft over 5,000. Would you say the increase is related to more folks being out? Would you say that it's related to is that relate theft motor vehicle? Never mind. So I'm just wondering, where do you think the over 5,000 category, scams, does that also cover like internet scams, cyber scams, which we know is a huge rise in that? So I'm just wondering, what do you think is contributing to that large increase?
Yeah, so I would say first, Chair, and to the board through you, is that I believe that there needs to be some further analysis in terms of the effects of COVID-19 on our criminal caseloads. But what we're seeing, as I had stated earlier, is that we saw a downward trend across the board. And I think we could all recall when we first went into a state of emergency and essentially we were really on a lockdown. What that did was there weren't a lot of people out and about, and we saw that there were a number of people who were essentially staying at home. And then with that, people go on the internet. And after the dust settles in terms of COVID restrictions, some individuals who might turn to looking to commit certain crimes look for the opportunities wherever they could present themselves. So we did see an upward trend in terms of the online frauds, as I mentioned previously. So a lot of people are at home. When they're at home, there's less opportunities for those that would conduct a residential break and enter during the day because people are within their residences. When the businesses were closed, we did see initially less crime in terms of people being out, but then as restrictions started to ease, we did see an increase in terms of commercial break and enters as well. As I said before, the numbers have still remained relatively constant in terms of the 3-year period of time. But we did see a significant decrease over, the beginnings of the COVID pandemic. And then, as I mentioned before, restrictions ease, they start to pick up again. But, there needs to certainly be more analysis in and around the effects of that. I know I can speak provincially. It doesn't necessarily impact, well, it does have an impact on the HRM. We did see an increase in terms of domestic violence. We saw an increase in terms of exploitation of children online because of the fact that people were home as well.
Okay, no, thank you. When you say that, and you do look, so when you look at the steps over 5,000, if you go to 2019, as you mentioned, it's relatively before, well, I guess I'm saying before quotation and COVID, it's in line with what we saw there. So thank you. Commissioner Chris, please. Another question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just one follow-up point, Superintendent Campbell, if you are going to speak to your statistician and kind of come back with a little more fine-grained data, I would also really appreciate, I think as my previous comment indicates, I'm quite interested in charging and policy around bail. And so I'm interested in particular if you could provide any data, and it need not be, at the very next meeting, it's sort of when it's convenient for you, but on what percentage of people who are being charged are being released on promises to appear, and what percentage of people are being released on undertakings to the police, right? So preventing them from having to go be detained, have bail hearing, just in light of, again, those concerns around very high rates of pretrial custody in our province.
Yeah, I can certainly provide you with some data. I could more than likely also provide you with some provincial data as well to see how the HRM might compare to the rest of the province. But I do know in the very early stages of COVID, essentially, we were trying organizationally, both corrections and the police, to keep people out of the jails is what we were trying to do. Which would have increased the option and the opportunity for police officers to release on premise to appear, as opposed to bring them before justice, because ultimately we did recognize the vulnerabilities of bringing people into custody, both to the institutions as well as to the individuals that were actually, undercharged. So again, anecdotally, I can tell you that was, there were many discussions in and around that with the province to reduce the number of people that were going to be appearing before a judge and actually being incarcerated. And really, from my perspective, I was seeing some of the most dangerous cases, whereas if it was just standard property crimes or other, I would call them more minor breaches, a breach of a breach, and you know what I'm talking about. We weren't really going there because it was counterproductive to the situation that we were trying to, in terms of COVID, outside of all the other reasons that I know that you and I could have a pretty meaningful and productive conversation around.
Yeah, thank you. And that's exactly right. I was part of many of those civil society groups at the early parts of COVID that were pushing and, we're supervising people in hotels. But unfortunately, what we've seen as the waves of COVID has gone on is that those numbers have gone back up. And so the question is, are there policies that can be put in place or recommended to keep them low in light of the fact that, there wasn't significant increases during crime during the time.
All right, thank you. Nobody else with comments, so I'm going to move to HRP to present their stats.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to the Commission. Our pressures as it relates to criminal activity are very similar to our partners with the RCMP. And, just before Christmas, we had some very heinous and tragic crimes that occurred around gun violence. So we're, cognizant of that, paying attention to that all the time, doing ongoing investigations, and again, working with the RCMP and others on those issues. So we will certainly continue to do that. Just in relation to property offenses, we laid a total of 118 charges for property crimes between July and December 2021. This includes offenses such as break and enter, theft of motor vehicle, and arson. This number is down from the same period in 2020, which saw 150 charges laid for property offenses. So interesting in light of the very helpful conversation that we just had in regards to the effects of COVID and what does that look like. And I do agree that further analysis would be required to make some determinations on that. We have seen an increase in reports of break and enter, 6.39% up, and theft under 5,000 at 21% increase. And possession of stolen goods has increased as well in the latter part of 2021. We have not seen the same increase in charges laid for these offense types. So we continue to monitor that and the solvability issues surrounding that, and we will continue to do that as we go forward. The other thing I did just want to talk about is liquor offenses, and as far as liquor offenses go, they were down somewhat in 2021 in the latter part of the year from 203 to 247, and some of the provincial offenses that we were monitoring also saw some fluctuation. Again, I think some of it can be COVID related, and as restrictions, ebbed and flowed as we went through the various streams that we had to work through. The rest of the numbers are on the report there. I won't go into too much more detail unless the Commission would like some further information. But I am cognizant of the conversation between Commissioner Critchley and Acting Chief Superintendent Campbell, just in regards to the administration of justice charges. I don't have exact numbers either, but I will work to get those so we have a little more fulsome report or something that meets the appetite of the board. And I'm happy to take any other information or suggestions if that is the will of the Commission.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Critchley.
Yeah, thank you, Chief, for anticipating my question. It would be great as with the RCMP to see that, where that category accounts for by my calculation, 28% of all offenses. You know, perhaps like with the citizen, right? It just in terms of the board's own work, it could be proactively broken down. I'm quite concerned around administration of justice offenses, and like with the RCMP, it would be great to see post-charge. You know, what's the percentage of people who are being released on promise to appear? What's the undertaking to police? You know, who's being taken into custody? You know, it just, as I'm sure was the experience with HRP, as with RCMP, was early on in COVID, the big push to keep people out of facilities. So just to see that reflected in the data. And one other question, I was very pleased to see the decrease in the liquor offenses. You know, I think, as you know, I first appeared before this board with some concerns as it related to the enforcement of liquor-related offenses. So I just wondered if you could speak to, obviously some of that is attributable to COVID, but I think on a year-over-year basis, expanding past 2020 onto, for instance, 2017, and you know, this is a significant year-over-year decrease. And so I just wondered if in your estimation, there were other factors beyond COVID that attributed to that, for example, enforcement approaches or anything like that.
Yeah, and good question, Commissioner. And, you know, kind of what we're always seeing and what we always try to attain is this whole engagement and education piece. So we're committed to that, particularly around liquor offenses, particularly around young people. So I can't say that it's, you know, all attributed to that, but I think we are seeing some advances in that area, working with the community, working with stakeholders, getting the message out, you know, with liquor establishments and whatnot. But, you know, it may be worth looking into a little more deeply, and I'll do that to see if we can have some more detail on that for the board when we come with our next set of statistics.
Thank you. I see Acting Chief Superintendent Campbell might be weighing in. I see your hand's up.
Thanks, Chair. Unless there's more questions for Chief Kinsella, I had some data for Commissioner Christie in relation to the liquor offenses. I didn't speak to those specifically, although I do have those numbers available. I'll just wait to make sure that the rest of the board members have other questions for Chief Kinsella or not.
I'm laughing because I called you Chief McDougal, Commissioner McDougal. Am I still up? Okay, I'm not on mute anymore, right?
Thank you. It just took me a minute to unmute.
Oh, okay.
Maybe this is too soon, given what we just heard about letting Chief Kinsella finish responding, but I'm just wondering, we had at one time during a work plan meeting in 2019, I believe, the idea of changing the way statistics were reported to the board, and seeing the interest in looking at these again and having some discussion about them. I'm wondering if we are happy to go back to this kind of reporting and do it quarterly or twice a year or whatever. It's just a question I have, because we did try to shift, but I don't know that we actually got the information that people were looking for.
So I'll comment, Chair, if that's okay. I think I might be wrapped up after that, and then Chief Superintendent Campbell can provide his stats. Yeah, to your, through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, I think really at the end of the day, it is really up to the Commission what they would like to see and what their appetite is. I think this discussion today has been very good and very helpful. So, you know, certainly from my perspective in the HRP, we're willing to deliver whatever it is the board would like to see. And Darren and I have had some conversation about this. We're happy to continue that dialogue as we go forward to make sure that the needs of the board are being met.
Anything else, Commissioner McDougal? No, okay. Commissioner Akinjojo.
Thank you very much, my chair. just wanted to find out, maybe not for today, from both sides of the chiefs. We've seen a lot of reports on the crime rates, but I would love to see a breakdown of how many of those reported have been concluded and how many of those are still outstanding in terms of breakthroughs. What was the success story there, or just statistics showing how many of those have been successfully concluded, or which ones are they still working on?
So through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, if you're looking for outcomes, solvability, ones that went to court, those kind of things, we can certainly deliver on some of that once they're concluded and been dealt with. I don't have a lot of detail in that regard right now, but happy to prepare that. And maybe, Chair, just a quick conversation, either an agenda setting or now exactly what we're looking for, so we can make sure we don't miss anything and deliver on that. Just while I'm chatting for a minute here, I've got a bit of a list for the offenses that fall into the other category. I won't go through them all, it's quite extensive. Chief Superintendent Campbell mentioned a few of them. And some of the others are extortion, intimidate justice participant, harassing, uttering threats, which was mentioned, mischief under. There's a lot of different charges. The administrative offenses all fall under here. So those are, it's a pretty big bucket. It's a pretty big capture area. But to your point, Commissioner Critchley, the admin of justice charges are certainly worth looking into.
Thank you. Yes, Chief Superintendent Campbell.
Yeah, just further, Chair, to what Chief Kinsella had mentioned, in terms of providing statistics, and I'm assuming what you're looking for is solve rates in terms of these crime stats. One of the things I just want to bring to your attention, though, I would suggest that solve rates, it would be probably most beneficial to look at those on an annual basis as opposed to a quarterly basis. And the only reason why I would say that is that it does take time to solve certain types of crime. For example, domestic homicides, they are usually wrapped up fairly quickly, whereas some commercial break and enters could take several months or years, including homicide investigations. In order to be able to close, they're being actively pursued and investigated. You might be at a project status with those, but it takes a considerable amount of time to bring those files to closure. So it's difficult to assign any weight to some of those solve rate stats because of the fact that some of these cases take sometimes several years to actually bring to conclusion. So I just wanted to put that out there as just a consideration.
Thank you. And just really quickly before we move on, Commissioner McDougall mentioned it, how we receive this information. And I believe we also, again, trying to use my memory bank, I believe we also used to put these stats online on some basis. I don't remember what the basis was, but it was either a quarterly or monthly, or I don't remember. So maybe we could look at, depending on how we want to receive this information in the future, if this is fine, or if we want another way, that we could also make sure maybe there's some communication that this information is available through HRM, whether that's a tweet or a Facebook post or whatever it might be, a news release that the stats have been updated. So we'll continue those conversations, but I do think that there is an aspect where there is folks who are looking for information and wondering what happened to the reporting we used to get. So I don't know, I don't have an answer of how to solve that, but just want to park that because I know we've talked about it in the past before. Okay, thanks all for the good discussion. So moving on to 11.1.4, 2022 Board of Police Commissioners Work Plan. Commissioner McDougall, would you like to take the lead on this one?
Sure. So you received the summary of our discussion in your package. And so now the next step for us is what are we going to do with this work plan? I think we had a really comprehensive discussion, albeit short, on December 4th, and was really a great day. We were productive, and the facilitator was able to talk to everybody in advance and establish priorities. And I think if you look at the work plan that she summarized for us here, you can see that the priorities are reflected in some of the objectives and the proposed action items. But we're sitting right now with proposed action items. And so the question is, what are we going to do with this this report, and what who wants to take ownership of each of these categories? If that's the way we want to proceed, it's something that we did in the past, where each commissioner took on responsibility for one of the items and tried to follow through. That kind of actually fell apart a bit with COVID. COVID gets to be blamed for everything. And but there are some really important things in here that do tie directly to, you know, the defunding report, first of all, to our own budget, as Commissioner Critchley raised this issue at a budget meeting at the end of December, or sorry, at the end of January. Communications, how we relate to the community. I think there's quite a bit of work that can be done, and this is a good guide. So I'm just, I don't have a proposal for how to move forward with this. I'm, I guess, looking to other commissioners to give input so that we can decide together what we're going to do with this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Starting with Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Commissioner McDougall, for your presentation and for your work in getting this together. I think it's a great start in terms of the work plan. I guess I don't want to jump the gun here, Smith. Is the idea at this point to kind of review and provide feedback on the proposed action items and the objectives, or is it to sort of sign up for action items, or can you just maybe give a little bit of clarity there?
Yeah.
Is there a motion attached? There is a motion. There's no motion attached to this.
There's no motion attached, and it really is the first opportunity to look at this. So your first point is, do we want to look at it, review it, and come back? That seems to make a lot of sense, unless people are really can see themselves leading one of these items right now, and they're happy to, we're happy to entertain that, given some of the other work that we are also undertaking. So I think your first point, Commissioner Critchley, is to review, and we'll look at it again in March. But we were concerned that we meant to look at this in January, but January seemed to get really full quickly. And so here's the chance to review what we did and for you to make some decision about it.
And really quickly.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Chair Smith.
Yeah. Sorry. Just to expand on that too. In the report, just for those who might not be following along, the consultant who worked with us on it gave suggested next steps. So I'm also hoping that we get some comments from commissioners as well. So I'm only saying this now, just if you want to provide some feedback while you're speaking, Commissioner Critchley. It says a small team supported by a consultant needs to review these notes and questions, then refine and offer a definition for each value, potentially combining some of these discussions to reduce the number of potential values. The refinement will be presented back to the Board of Police Commissioners for further discussion and then a decision. The Board of Police Commissioners will have an option to do community consultation around the proposed values as well. That's something just while you're speaking for other commissioners to think about as well. As there's some next steps highlighted in there. We're not married to those. Those are more just us to consider. So we should make at least a decision in principle. It doesn't have to be a motion of how we want to move forward. So yeah, it was a good question, Commissioner.
Okay, do you mind if I sort of answer in light of that, or Mr. Kent, do you want to go ahead? I've talked a lot. So.
No, you can. I interrupted you, so you can keep going.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll say sort of two things. Is I think I really appreciate the work that's gone into it. I think it's a solid reflection of our discussions in January. I think that kind of, I don't want to speak too much about the defunding report, kind of given having declared conflict about that, but in light of just the discussions even earlier today, the piece around resourcing is a very key question, right? And I think that, Chair Smith, you've raised this earlier today, the question of consultant to support the board's work, to support the work of the newly struck subcommittee, which maybe perhaps I will advise but not be a member of, which is great by me. Or perhaps, as I've suggested, a staff member, right? And I think a lot of these things are especially items 1 and 2, and then also item 3 as it relates to communication. I just want to be very blunt. I appreciate that COVID created a lot of challenges for the board in its work. And I also appreciate that this is a volunteer body where 3 of the 7 members are city councilors and I don't even know how Lindell has time to sleep. So I very much appreciated how how big of a commitment this work is and how many other claims on people's time that they have. So I would suggest that staffing is necessary. It's not, in light of the kind of changing work of the board, it's something that just has to happen. As you saw, I did bring an amendment at the previous meeting to request funding for staffing. But I guess the last thing I will say is that the objective 1, which is clarity regarding our roles, that's something that I've pushed very strongly since I've been on the board. It's something that I'm happy to continue to push, even to be the responsible member for. What I would suggest, though, is that it's one thing for us to understand what our roles are. And I think that in many ways that's lacking right now. There's not a lot of shared understanding around the powers of the board, the distinction between, for example, policy and operational matters and where those distinctions lie, our relationship with the HRM and city council, these important questions about the governance roles of the board. So that's one thing. But another, and I think more important thing, is that even once we have that information in hand, another important piece of work is figuring out how to operationalize that information. So, and I just want to give a brief example that in the Morden report, which was a report that was written by a retired Ontario Court of Appeal judge into the work of the Toronto Police Service Board, what Morden found was that, one, that there was not a clear understanding of what the board's jurisdiction was. So he goes through and provides that. But then, importantly, he says, in light of this, understanding of what your jurisdiction is, here's how the structure in which you should be working, right? Here's how your meetings should be conducted. Here's the kind of committees that need to be in place. And I think I don't obviously want to be too overly prescriptive. The decisions rest with the board ultimately, but the operationalizing piece, I don't know if that's a word, but operationalizing what our roles are is the most important part. So I just want to give one final example of how Morden framed that in the report. And I would encourage you, it's a very long report, but just to read chapters 1 and 2, where he talks about why do we have police boards in Canada? You know, what are the very basic points of law that exist in every jurisdiction in Canada that has police boards? You know, and how should they work? How do they relate to the chief of police? And one thing Morden points out is that as a board, we have policy-making power. But in order for that policy-making power to be used effectively, both in the sense of crafting policies that are informed by operational realities, and importantly, once the policy is made, in ensuring that it's being complied with operationally, Morton said that there's an important information exchange that has to happen between the chief on the one hand and the police board on the other, and that in 90% of the situations, the information is with the chief. The chief has the information as it relates to operations that the board needs in order to use its policy power, in order to fulfill its government mandate. And so he recommended, he said a policy should be created about what sorts of operational information should be shared and when. So I think what I want is just to bring it back to this objective one. It's very important that we not only get an understanding of what our mandate is, but once we understand what our mandate is, how to act on the mandate, because there can be a disconnect at that second stage as well.
Thanks for that, Commissioner. Commissioner Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I absolutely agree with Commissioner Critchley on what is a fundamental piece that we need to sort through, which is resourcing the work that we have identified in this plan and what we have ahead of us. I just want to lay the groundwork a little bit of what my lens is today, because I think we need reminding of this. You know, we are in a world right now we're within a very short number of years, and more specifically a year or two, and most recently months and weeks, where we've had the warning report guiding and moving forward this mass casualty in Nova Scotia involving policing services, and that report's coming out, or some version of something, a part of it is coming out today. You know, last year in HRM, we had a significant event around housing and homelessness that we have identified that, you know, it has to have attention and consideration for change. We have the Ottawa Freedom event, and now we have Ukraine global unrest, right? And all of these policing and security issues. Never has there been a time, I think, certainly in my history, where I've had the opportunity to affect change and be part of something that we really have to take seriously. And the work that we do at the board to understand that really that has not been resourced in a way that is adequate to really do the work that needs to be done here, is discouraging. I'm surprised. I do know that some of that resource, I shouldn't say it's not fully resourced, because we do have the Office of the Clerk's support here. We have them doing some of that. We have support through our legal department of HRM. But it's kind of like an add-on to off the sides of the desk, and off the sides of their budget. And it is time for this board, I believe, to be properly resourced. That is a standalone resource for this board as an item of a budget that is approved year after year. There is so much to unpack. There is so much to focus on. There are serious conversations that we now need to be part of as things unfold in policing services. Our chiefs and their teams need us to be there and be part of these changes that are coming. We can't possibly do it without some resources that are dedicated to us. Staff who are here today need us to be resourced as well. The community entities and agents of change that came together for the Wortley report need this commission to be resourced. So I think number one priority is that we identify a group of us, which I'm happy to put my name forward, to have conversations with the municipal CAO and with the budget and our CFO around how do we get there. It has to be immediate. It has to be soon. We're about to approve a budget coming up in April. Now is the time, because if we don't, none of this is going to get done. I also want to say that, so I'm throwing my name out there. I really, there are other counselors on this commission, and maybe that's where it should start, with us, because we have that direct connection to the budget process, and we can speak to this directly on behalf of all of our commissioners here. So the other piece of this, I feel like we did a lot of good work. We had some really good debates and conversations. We didn't all agree on everything, but we landed somewhere. But I left there feeling like that we weren't done. I left there feeling like this report that we've got in our hands, we didn't quite finish. We left it. We got it to where we had a bunch of, and it's referenced in here, we had a bunch of sticky notes, Post-it notes. I'm not sure that this is ready to be endorsed and have us each attached to it, because I feel like there's still some pieces left out. Because a lot of what we will have to do outside of that piece around identifying the resources, there's still a lot of work to be sorted through on because it will be hard for any one of us to step up and say, yeah, I'll take the lead on that, and not really know what we're saying I'm taking the lead on and what we have the capacity to do. So, really, I kind of feel like we're putting a little bit of the cart before the horse. The resources almost seems like those are the horses. We need the horses to pull this cart. But if we don't have those horses, that cart's going to just sit there and do nothing. So a point of clarification on, Mr. Chair, on your remarks about the added notes that the consultant did. Those notes that she's referring to there, which is the small team, etc., is specific. I believe I interpreted it as specific to the values not yet being complete. The values, like I feel like that was this plan was put forward as if we all landed on it, and the values is the one thing that she's saying is unfinished. Whereas I'm going to challenge it. I feel like it's not all finished, at least to the degree that I, as a commissioner, feel comfortable attaching my name to action items. Until we get some resources, we're in a tough spot. And I don't think we're doing any commissioners, any commission, any police service, and the residents that we're serving and asking our police teams to serve any favors by not going for some resources to make this happen. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Commissioner. And just on the clarification, so you're right, the values, the next steps were related to the values, but when I should have clarified, I was using it as like a general sense of things to think about as we move forward, because you're right, this is related to values, but we need to be some more general thinking of how we're going to approach this work. And the other piece around the budget, so we did pass the motion that's going to be at council when we talk about our budget adjustment, and I'll see if I can find it somewhere. I might have it saved. We did pass the motion related to the budget, and I can't get to it quick. There we go. That was moved by Commissioner Christie, second by Commissioner Jojo, that the Board of Police Commissioners recommend Halifax Regional Council increase the Board of Police Commissioners budget by $100,000 to provide staffing to the Board of the Police Commissioners, and that this request be for a budget increase added to the budget adjustment list. So we'll be able to, when we discuss our budget adjustment list, this should be there. And if not, we'll figure out how to make it end up on that list. But everything you said, I hope that you echo at council, because you're right. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So just as a quick follow up to that, and I recall that, and that's why I felt it was like, okay, we still have to iron this out. That Councilor Commissioner Blackburn and yourself and I are going to be in the middle of that debate. It wouldn't hurt as well. I think it's worth saying now to all the other commissioners to feel free to present at one of our budget committee meetings on this. you have a voice as a citizen, and you have a role on this committee. So, you know, that's another opportunity for you to do it. I feel like almost like we need another work day to talk about what we have in here. That was so, you know, Commissioner Critchley has a point here around, we can't blame everything on COVID, but there's no question that conversation that we had in person was so productive and helpful. And we don't get that here in this kind of Zoom meeting, but things are opening up. We still have this work plan. I feel like we should go back to the table for a few hours again together and walk ourselves through this now that we have it in this context. Because we've not done that. We left it in a bunch of kind of post-it note space. Just a thought. And I'll leave it for the others.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I made a note of that, and I'll circle back to members just to kind of see how we want to move forward. So good point. Commissioner Akindojo, or sorry, before you go, Commissioner McDougall, did you want to follow up on any of those points, or did you have something separate?
Well, I just wanted to thank Councillor Kent actually for voicing support for a budget for this commission. I think it's appropriate and it's timely, and it's and I also want to mention that a number of times as we were planning the day, I think Commissioner Critchley was concerned and frustrated that there wasn't more time devoted to governance, and we were reassured. We working with the facilitator, that would be Chair Smith and I, we spoke specifically about a follow-up day, at least, if not more. And I didn't see this plan that had been pulled together as a result of our day. I saw it as a record of what we discussed. And I guess I was maybe being provocative and saying, if you want to take responsibility for one of these, like, you know, you can sign up. But really, this document is the summary of where we went in that one short day. And there's lots more to be done. But without the kind of support I've just heard from certainly from Councillor Kent and from Commissioner Critchley, this document could just stop right now. So we need you to really step up and tell us where to go with this and help us get there. So I'm just really encouraged to hear what you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Akindojo.
Thank you very much for the time. I just want to, a lot have been said by both Commissioner Harry and Commissioner Kent, and I just want to give my support to that. That was why at the meeting that we held, I supported that immediately. There's no other way for us to proceed with success on this commission without having some resources to support us. Like I said, probably we're just two of us that are private individuals here, and it's impacting on our time. We want to commit all our time to it, but we cannot give it all. And it's really, really impacting on our time. The length of meetings and the issues that are still yet to be attended to, the only way forward is to, just like recommended, look for people to support us there. On the issue of governance, I have personally gotten myself involved in some of the training organized by Councillor Madigo, and it has been very, very resourceful in terms of powers, duties, and jurisdiction of the board. We're not just the only ones struggling with that. Other police boards are also struggling with that, and they've been struggling with that from history. So we need to not beat ourselves too much at the back on this. We are proceeding, and those courses or those seminars have been so useful. So I'd recommend that some of us to attend those. Some very, very senior old board members sharing their best practices, and it's really helped me a lot. So I just recommend that we also attend those. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Oh my goodness. Anybody else have comments before we close this discussion? Oh, yeah, Commissioner Critchley.
I'll just say maybe 2 points. I really appreciated Commissioner Kent's comments as it related to staffing. And I wanted to point out that in 2016, there were some board members at the time, Fred Hansberger and Mike Morash, who did a review of the governance of the police board. And they had some concerns that were raised at the time. And one of the recommendations that was presented then was that the board consider hiring a full-time staff person to support the board's work. So, I mean, this is a long-standing concern with the board. As Commissioner Akindoju noticed, it's an issue that exists at a variety of police boards around Canada. But what I would suggest is that there are documents out there like the Morden report, the Senator Murray Sinclair, who I'm sure most people know and are aware of. He did a report in 2018 on the operation of the Thunder Bay Police Board after some serious concerns that were raised there regarding anti-Indigenous racism. And the recommendations that come out of Senator Sinclair's report are tremendous. They relate to things like what sort of questions should board members be asking of the chief? How should information be exchanged? How can they engage the community, in particular in that context, the Indigenous community, right? What sort of consultation protocols can be put in place? So what I would suggest is that I think that it's a lovely idea to come back in person and to look at these items again. But again, I think as came up at our last work plan session, without a clear understanding of what our jurisdiction is, what our powers are, how to operationalize those powers, we might kind of end up going around in circles, as has been the case with many police boards around Canada. And so my suggestion, and I won't bring a motion or anything today, would be that, there are these best practices that have identified, Commissioner Akindoju has recognized that Carol is very involved with Canadian Association of Police Governance. I've read a lot of their reports. They have best practices for board governance. The Sinclair report has a variety of recommendations as it relates to best practice for board governance, as does the Morden report. So it could be that what the board needs is, first, I would suggest an independent legal opinion as to its jurisdiction and its powers under the Police Act. And I say independent not to beat up on Marty or to suggest that the legal services couldn't do it. But we now have a staff report from legal services saying that when it comes to matters of the board's jurisdiction, the perception or the risk of the perception of a conflict of interest where the legal services advises the police and the police board is at its highest, it's at its most acute. So I would suggest that an important first step would be to get an independent legal opinion, perhaps in line or part of this other independent legal opinion that the board has now removed a second time to understand our jurisdiction, but then engage a consultant, a governance expert, who can act on that understanding of our jurisdiction and say, this is how your meetings should be designed. This is the sorts of information exchanges that should exist between the chief and the board members in light of the recommendations from CAPG, from the Morden report, from the Sinclair report. These are best practices as it relates to community consultation. And once we had a report like that, right, that could then guide our work in terms of developing and implementing a work plan. Not to say those things can't happen at the same time. I understand that reports from independent legal reports, consultant reports take time. But just to say that I think there is a wealth, as Commissioner Akindoju has acknowledged, a wealth of resources out there, and it is beyond the capacity of the board members at present to synthesize those resources and make concrete recommendations about how to improve our governance practices.
Thanks, Commissioner. So there's no motion. One sec, before I say that. Yeah, there's no motion related to this, but what has been highlighted is two things. It's the resourcing piece, which will come to council very soon because we're in budget currently. But the other one is a follow-up in-person meeting for us to talk about the work plan as well. So taking those two items back, and we'll follow up with the commissioners to see how we move forward on those items. So no motions needed. Made note of that, and we can make a note in the minutes as well. All right, so moving on to our next item. What time are we? Okay, we're at 3:21. This one should be fairly quick, and then let's talk about some of the other items on the agenda. I think we could probably get through them, but let's deal with this one really quickly. 11.1.5, Canadian Association of Police Governments membership renewal. Commissioner McDougall.
Thank you. I don't have an awful lot to say, except that we've already heard that that there's a great deal of information that can be gleaned from the national organization, and being a member gives us access to a number of experts and to whatever's happening across the country. In fact, there's a webinar this Thursday that talks about governance in crisis, following what happened in Ottawa with the convoy and what happened with their board. And so some of the work is timely. There's a conference coming up in September in Saskatoon. We're probably going to need to think about our representation there in the future. And I think it's a really good opportunity for the board to gain information and learn from best practices if we take advantage of it. And so this membership renewal has gone out to all boards across the country, and I'm asking for approval to renew that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kent.
Yeah, do we need the motion on the floor though, in this case?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, so Carol, do you want to put it on the floor or you want me to?
No, I'll do it. Thank you, though. That the Board of Police Commissioners approve the annual renewal of the Commission's membership in the Canadian Association of Police Governance in the amount of $5,100.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Kent. Commissioner Kent.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering at this stage, knowing there's no specific budget, Marty, is this in your department that you would pay for that? Who covers the cost of this $5,100?
So we do have a budget. What's our amount? I know it's not much.
Oh, you had a budget, didn't you?
Yeah. I don't know who has that number. I think it was 13.
10,000, wasn't it? Wasn't it 10,000?
I think it was 13, and it was it had previously been 25, but was reduced to 13 during COVID, and we've spent some money, but I think we just saw some figures about the police budget, the commission budget, in the chief's report as a separate item, but it is, after a discussion, is being moved over to the CAO's office, I believe, as a line item there. That only deals with the issue of the budget itself. The amount, though, is really a significant item going forward.
Do we have anyone from finance here by chance, maybe? Or maybe even Jacques? Jacques here? I'm not sure.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I don't recall the amount either. I don't have it in front of me. I believe Commissioner McDougall is correct. I think it was previous to COVID, I think it was right around 25,000, and then it was scaled back because nobody was traveling and stuff like that for that COVID time. Presumably, you'd want to, increase the amount of budget going forward beyond the 25. So whatever this costs, it'll get covered some way somehow, whether it's in the budget or not. It's a cost that's legitimate, and we'll figure out a way to pay for it. But I think there's capacity in the current budget to pay for it. But I'd have to double check. I don't know. I don't have the detail.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the budget now. I don't see it, but we'll get that information. Oh, actually, Craig Horton, you might have the. Thanks, Ian. Craig, do you remember what the last number was?
Chair, through you, sorry, Mr. Horton has had to leave for another meeting.
Okay.
I can get that information for you from him if you'd like.
No, because well, maybe you can, but we did move it to Jacques' budget, so maybe Jacques, you can send us an email. But there's, to answer Commissioner Kent's original question, we do have a budget to cover it. It's just don't know what the number of our budget is right now.
Yeah, just to be clear, Mr. Chair, it's not moved to my budget right now.
Yeah,
at the
right,
moment.
true.
So
Yeah.
the idea, if you recall the conversation, we discussed that this will be a transfer, probably some mid-year or some point where it was too late for the budget process for this particular year.
Right.
We can easily do that as a journal entry anyway after the fact. So at some point, the 22-23 amount will end up in my business unit as opposed to the HRP business unit for your request. The current budget remains with HRP. And I'm assuming that the monies for this particular item will come out of 21-22 fiscal year budget. And if there's insufficient funds in relation to that account right now, then we'll just find the money somewhere to pay for it.
Okay, thanks, Jacques. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, can't find it. All right. So if there's no further comments on that, call for the question on that item.
Question?
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. All right, so that passes. So we already did 11.2.1, which was Commissioner Blackburn's review of define the Fund Police Subcommittee. We had really quickly, because we're 2 minutes before our scheduled end, we have 11.2, which is the proposal to host the Canadian Association of Police Governance. Carol, Commissioner McDougall, is this one that could wait till next meeting, or is it something that we should do now?
Well, I can do it very quickly unless there's some controversy. It's really not going to impact anything until obviously 2024. I think the last time the conference was held was in Halifax was 2014, and it brings together a lot of the policing leaders from both across the country and the US and the UK, and delves into some of the issues we've been talking about. And traditionally, it's been held back to back with the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. So there's an opportunity to bring policing leaders from that conference to this as well. There's support from Discover Halifax to do this. They've written letters. So at this point, it's really me sending a letter to say, we're interested in doing this for 2024. What do you think, National Board of Canadian Association of Police Governance? And they'll review it in March, April, and then we'll see where that goes. They could say no.
Well,
and I won't be on the board, but I volunteered to work as a volunteer on this if the city's chosen.
Okay, well, if there's no one who has comments, we can put the motion on the floor, and maybe we can get this one at least solidified.
I do have a question, Mr. Chair. We can put the motion on the floor though. Let's get that done.
Okay.
Motion is that the Board of Police Commissioners send a proposal to the Canadian Association of Police Governance expressing the Board of Police Commissioners' interest in hosting the Canadian Association of Police Governance annual conference in 2024. And it would be in August, mid-August. I've learned since I wrote this recommendation.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. And I have a couple of questions, comments. So I understand, to me, this is absolutely something we should do. I think that this does give us the opportunity to really make some connections and be thrust into the whole debates and all the debates and conversations that are relevant to the work that we're doing. And it's local, and it's nice to have something coming back and something to look forward to in that regard. I do have a question around logistics? Who actually does the planning of it? How large of a team, if that's local, how large of a team would that be? How much time does that mean for us as commissioners to contribute to that? How do you facilitate a conference of that nature here in the city? Because it's been a long time since I've been here. But the second part of that question is a proposal to me, and Carol, is more than a letter saying we'd like to do it. I'm guessing, I could be way off base, but if these folks are looking for a proposal, do we not have to send them something that's a little more comprehensive, which is why we'd want to do it? What do we have the capacity to do? Here's all the reasons why, and here's what we can do, and here's how we will get that done. To me, that's a proposal. I don't know if that's something we could archive. We probably have some of that information from, what was it, 2014 that it was last done? That would be worth looking into to see, and maybe coming back to us, and that could just be through email, to give us a sense of what does it really entail? What are we saying we want to do? That to me, I've been involved in creating conferences, and they're not easy. And it's important that we put on our best show and put our best foot forward. So I'm just thinking about that. So I'm happy to support this, but I want us to, at the end of the day, before you send off a proposal, I think it would be nice for us all to be able to at least have a look at it and say, yeah, that's that. I think that for me, it's approving in principle until I actually know what we're saying we're going to do.
I did include, there is a PDF that it kind of gives a background to that with the documents, I believe. But just off the top, first of all the planning and content and agenda development is done by CAPG and the executive director. All the budgeting, travel arrangements for speakers, all of that is done by CAPG. There's a request that we would have a committee that would work with CAPG to, bring some local flavor. If we've got some specific thing we want to, or speakers or leaders, or say we want our municipal forces to be, our mayor to be on the panel when there's a discussion about something, our chief of police, our chief superintendent, that kind of thing is all possible. There's requests that we help with registration, i.e. volunteer people. I chaired this conference for 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, I guess. And it's CAPG does all the lion's share of the work. They really do everything. And I'm watching it happen for Saskatoon this year. And the Saskatoon committee is sort of joining in and bringing local flavor, but they're not really tasked with doing any of the local logistics. And Discover Halifax has offered all their services to do that.
And just quickly follow up to that, Carol, I don't have a second PDF that went with it. All I have is the motion. So
sorry,
maybe
there was it was in the agenda that was posted.
Oh, I'll post it online?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at what the package came out from Andrea. Okay, thank you. I'll have a look at that. I'm happy to support it.
Okay, if nobody else has comments, we'll call for the question on that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. All right, that passes. So I believe, we have two other commissioner motions. So one, do we need a motion to go past time first?
Yes, Chair Smith, if you wish for that motion to be passed.
Okay, anyone wants to move that?
I so move.
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by, I think it was Commissioner McDougall, maybe? Okay. All right, so before we go to those two motions, I'm just going down, look at the agenda. We have the chief updates. We don't have Okay, so I think we can probably get through this fairly quickly. All right, so 11.2.3, Commissioner Critchley, Human Resource Consultant, to study the issue of understaffing and increased mental health claims within the Halifax Regional Police. Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair Smith. I largely spoke to this at our budget meeting, so I'm happy to answer questions as they arise. I think that I've heard Commissioner Kent in her council role make this point a couple times that, we are a body that under the Police Act is tasked with the administration, organization, and policy required for an effective and adequate police service. I've expressed, I've expressed a lot of praise for the chief in terms of identifying the reintegration program used, I believe, in Edmonton as one possible solution-oriented way of addressing the issue of understaffing that we've been hearing a lot about. I've made known that I don't necessarily feel at present that we understand the full scope of the problem, what the contributing causes are for the problem, or the most effective way to address the problem. I'm not going to relitigate anything from the budget committee, but I think, in light of our duties, it's important that we think in a way that's in keeping with best practices, that's sustainable. And so my hope is that by directing the chief to go away and think about what would that look like in terms of hiring a human resources consultant to study this issue. I see Marty's got his hand. Marty, do you want me to finish or do you want to speak? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. You can finish unless you want to hear me first on this. It might help, Chair.
Well, I don't know what you're going to say, so you go ahead.
Okay. All I wanted to say is that that I think I undertook following the last meeting to speak to our executive director of human resources about this and what she said to me and I think I did advise the chair so far was that she would like to prepare something and present it to the commission, giving it an indication of the services that are currently provided by HR and the work that they've already done in this area. And perhaps the commission could then consider that before taking the next step, basically.
Yeah, I sort of suspected, Marty, that there would be a staff report that would precede the hiring of a consultant. So I appreciate you having reached out to somebody. That was a point that was raised, that there were a lot of internal resources and programs as it related to HR. I'm sort of ignorant about the extent to which whether those apply across all the business units, including HRP or not. So a staff report would be very useful. But I think basically my main point is that these reports from consultants are fairly commonplace. I referenced in the motion one that was done by a group here in Halifax, HR Atlantic, where they looked at the issue of very, very, very similar issue in a fairly similar context, that being understaffing and mental health issues and mental health leave in corrections in the Northwest Territories. And I actually spoke to one of the researchers who worked on that report. And apparently there's been a fairly, it was very successfully received by staff. It provided some, important recommendations, both in the immediate and longer term for addressing some of those issues. And I think very importantly, it did so in a way that is financially sustainable. I heard some points that were raised at the budget debate on Friday, which, echoed sort of a similar point that I had made during our own debate, which is that there's obvious immediate concerns as it relates to staffing that need to be filled. Not to suggest those will be filled immediately, because as the chief has reminded us on a number of occasions, it will take up to a year to bring new staff in. It's not an immediate fix. But we need to think long-term. We need to think in an evidence-based way. I think we all agree on that. And I think that once we have an understanding of the resources available through HR, if we're looking externally at some of these organizations that are very expert in this area, then we can identify best practices and come up with a plan. And I would suggest that not only is that plan the right thing to do, the smart thing to do, it's actually the thing that we're required to do in keeping with our duties under 55(1)(b), which, as I mentioned, talk about the administration, organization, and policies for an adequate police service.
If I could just,
Marty.
just add to that, that I think it might be wise to hear from the executive director of HR for the municipality first, right? Because normally the human resources for the police are conducted by our HR department, and then you might have a better idea where you're going with this, as opposed to, I mean, my concern might be you hire a consultant, the consultant just gets their information from our HR department and repeats it, right? So
Right,
I think it might be worth at least hearing from.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I hope maybe that wasn't clear, but I completely agree with you. I don't want to waste time or money or do things that HR is already doing. So are you suggesting that I defer the motion, or that we pass the motion and get a staff report and presentation pursuant to it?
I had put this on spoken to the executive director of HR, and she was actually, she intends to prepare something that she could submit. And what she told me was she was hoping to get it done for this meeting of the commission, but she wouldn't make that timeline and could have it for the next meeting. So that would be my proposal. Basically, you might consider deferring this to the next meeting, so you would have that information from her, and then you could make an informed decision on where you want to go.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And I think particularly as our last regular meeting was 7 hours, largely because of amendments that I brought, I will happily defer, and maybe I'll even score some points with other commissioners.
So if you want to put the motion on the floor, just so it's on the floor, and then it will just be on there as a deferral.
Okay, I will move the motion.
Yeah, please. You have to read it.
Oh, okay. That the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners direct the chief officer of the HRP to, in consultation with and with the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners, hire an independent human resources consultant to study the issues of understaffing, increased mental health claims, and increased long-term absences within the HRP. The objective of this study would be to present a report to the board, which would outline A, the contributing factors giving rise to these issues, and B, recommendations for addressing these issues in a sustainable and fiscally responsible manner in the short, medium, and long term. This report could then inform budget deliberations in future fiscal years.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. Commissioner Chrisley, you're good on this? Yep, thank you. Commissioner Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to support a version of this motion. I would not be acting responsibly with my fiscal hat on of being a counselor in relation to budgetary concerns. So if we can satisfy the intent of what we're trying to get at through the human resources of HRM, then I think we should exercise that first. So, but I absolutely agree that this is a great step to take. Many counselors around the table expressed similar. And I think we also did through some of the conversations that we had when we first had the presentation, so we could the budget presentation, to help us understand some of the things that were at play as to why staffing increases and stuff were on the table. Now, I'm wondering though. So I understand, is it now that one of us could put on a deferral motion now? So Harry, do you want to specifically do that, or I don't mind doing that, or whatever. I just want to understand that that's the next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to either make a deferral, or I can amend the motion to include a part at the beginning that says that, ahead of what is contemplated in Part B, the board receive a staff report about this issue. And I'm happy to do whatever Marty or Ian suggests is best.
Could we not even go so far, I'm thinking, as to just amend that one sentence after the first sentence after the Board of Police Commissioners, with the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners, obviously the rest of it came first, engage human resources expertise to study the issues of understanding. And we have agreed that we should reach out first to our in-house human resources, because we don't have to decide in this motion if it's going to be by virtue of a consultant or in-house. That would leave it open, and we can get the motion forward without a deferral. I'm just thinking that.
But really quickly, and I'll go to Marty and Ian. My suggestion, again, this is the will of the commission. My suggestion is we defer it only because depending on the information that we might get from human resources, that might change how the motion looks. I'm good either way, but just depending on what information they provide to us, it could change some of the outcome of the motion. But that would be my suggestion. But again, whatever commission wants to do.
Chair Smith, and I would say I'm happy to agree to that. I think that's more in keeping with the intent, just a deferral, and I see Ian shaking his head. So if that's also a way to deal with this quickly, kind of in light of the length of our meeting, then I'm happy.
Cool. I see Ian's hands down. Marty, you're good? Okay. Anything further, Commissioner Kent? Okay, so the motion of deferral is on the floor. All those in favor of defer until next meeting, pending report from or information from HRM Human Resources, say aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, that passes. Moving to our last item, which is Commissioner Critchley. Well, not second last, I guess. 11.2.4 special public consultation meeting on policing in gender-based violence. If you want to put the motion on the floor.
Sure, yeah, I'll read it. So this is a three-part motion. So the first part reads that the Board of Police Commissioners invite subject matter experts in the areas of gender-based violence, family violence, sexual violence, and intimate partner violence, collectively gender-based violence, to give presentations to the board at a special consultation meeting. That the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners direct the Chief Officer of the Halifax Regional Police to, ahead of the special consultation meeting, draft a staff report outlining policies, procedures, statistics, and other relevant information relating to the issue of policing and gender-based violence. And 3, that the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners advise the Chief Officer of the Halifax District RCMP to do the same.
Seconded by?
Second.
Commissioner Blackburn, Mr. Critchley.
Okay, so what I've requested here, I know I've called it a three-part motion, but it's really 2 staff reports followed by a consultation meeting. So I just want to explain briefly, each part of the motion and then sort of the rationale. So the first thing that's being requested, 2 staff reports, one from HRP and one from RCMP. And I've listed on page 2 of the motion some of the information that should be included there. So I'm interested in summaries of policies and procedures relating to the issue of gender-based violence. And so, for instance, there I'm interested in the procedures and policies relating to high-risk files, mandatory charging, and the like. The second bullet point, overview of existing initiatives, programs, and strategies currently in place or in development, including with victim services. Victim services, I think, is a very key piece there. Year-over-year statistics as they relate to charging. And I know, for instance, Chair Smith, you raised this point earlier about the question about domestics and sexual assaults. And also just any other information that would be relevant to the board's deliberations. And the reason I think it's fairly obvious in asking for a staff report before doing any consultation, it's actually in keeping with best practices for the police board governance. So here I cite Justice John Morden, and the underlying part says, a police board cannot be satisfied that is properly analyzing a policy issue and developing an appropriate policy if it does not see any material that shows what the situation on the ground actually is. So that's the rationale behind the staff reports. The second piece is the special consultation meeting. And what I want to suggest here is that there is in HRM significant expertise regarding policing and gender-based violence. And in the academic sphere, at Dalhousie University in 2021, Dr. Nancy Ross at the School of Social Work co-authored an extremely influential report entitled A Review of Pro-Arrest, Pro-Charge, and Pro-Arrest Policies, Redefining Responses to Domestic Violence, which received extensive coverage in the media across Canada. Dr. Ross is now also conducting a research project entitled Family-Centered and Trauma-Informed Responses to Gender-Based Violence, Implications for Transforming Justice and Community System Community Partners, together with the Law Reform Commission of Nova Scotia and the Be the Peace Institute. And on the front lines, a variety of service providers in HRM also have extensive and highly relevant knowledge, skills, and expertise. For example, the Transition House Association of Nova Scotia regularly advocates for policy reform on behalf of transition houses in the province. Likewise, a number of organizations in the city, including Alice House, the Marguerite Center, the YWCA Halifax, together collaborated on a multi-year Home for Good project, which, in investigating the barriers that women face when trying to access safe, secure, and affordable housing, focused heavily on the issue of gender-based violence. Finally, there are a variety of other organizations and programs, such as ISANS and the Creating Communities of Care project, which is a joint initiative of the MLSN, the Association of Black Social Workers, the Friendship Center, and the Elizabeth Fry Society, which have extensive experience working with Halifax's diverse and racialized communities. And I want to suggest that the board will have to think carefully about which experts to involve to ensure a broadly representative process. One option would be to offer multiple consultation sessions broke down by theme. Another option might be to issue an open call to service providers and academics, which permit experts to be involved as their interest and capacity permits. And so finally, the point around rationale is I want to suggest that holding a public consultation meeting on this issue is in keeping with a number of our duties as a board. So first, it's in keeping with the function of a board under paragraph 55(1)(b) to provide the administrative direction, organization, and policy required for adequate, effective, and efficient policing. It's also in keeping with the board's duties under paragraphs 55(3)(c), (d), and (e), which include the duties to ensure that community needs and values are reflected in policing priorities, programs, and strategies, as well as actually in the actual delivery of policing services. And finally, our duty to act as a conduit between the community and police service providers. And I just want to note in closing that issues regarding policing and gender-based violence were also raised at the board's first ever public consultation meeting regarding the budget proposal on January 31st, 2022. A very cute dog. Was that a Shih Tzu? Very nice. So, absent any questions, that's my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kent.
Thank you. I just want to commend Commissioner Critchley for bringing this forward. I think this is a wonderful idea. Great motion. Absolutely. I believe this is in keeping with all of the things that we've talked about around improving the communications pieces, helping inform the policies and the directions, the lens of which we work through. I don't know how many of you know, but I was the provincial coordinator for Transition House Association. So and I've often advocated that the resources and the expertise that we have in our communities is often the last to hear about things. Yes, he's missing his mommy right now. I've been at this computer for quite a few hours here now. So anyway, I'm really, really pleased to see this and I'm happy to support it. I look forward to it. And I think this could be the beginning of a great model for many things that we do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I almost called you Councillor Critchley. Maybe that's your next stop. Commissioner Critchley, thank you so much. I very much appreciate you bringing this forward. The community outreach piece, I think, is absolutely in line with what we wanted to see. We had the discussion about the work plan, and that was something that we definitely discussed during that afternoon session, and that was getting out into the community more. I just like just to keep this in the back of your mind when this report comes back, that we should definitely make arrangements for our Women's Advisory Committee to either be a part of the meeting where that presentation is presented, or make arrangements for a presentation to that advisory committee, because this, this report is very much on par with the type of work that the Women's Advisory Committee is seeking to do, and I think they would gain some useful insight by hearing that presentation and seeing that report when it comes back. Thank you so much, Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you both. I don't see, oh, Commissioner McDougall.
I just want to say thank you too. I am really, really excited about the idea of having a public consultation, and I think it's really timely, and it's something, as Commissioner Critchley has said, is part of our responsibility. And here's a subject matter that we can actually tackle in a public consultation. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just echo everyone's comments. I think it's a great motion. I probably would have more to say if I didn't have a headache at the moment, but I definitely appreciate all the work Commissioner Christie done to get this forward. So we'll be happy to support this. So with that, I'll call for the question.
Question?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those say nay. All right, that passes. So we have no commissioner updates. We do have our chief update, and I'm just wondering, because we are past time, if there's anything that the chiefs want to highlight that's very important. Give them a chance. If there's anything that they want to, if they want to save it to next meeting to have maybe a longer update, that we could do that. But anything that you think is important for us to know at the moment, feel free to do that. And I'll just start with Chief Costello.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be quick. I only have one item I think is important. I have a number of items, but they can wait. I just wanted to make the board aware that we recently announced a rollout of new articles of identification for sworn officers. After significant internal discussions, these new tools address officer safety while also bolstering transparency, accountability, and visibility in our community. Some of the key highlights as we create an implementation plan with next steps, instructions and timelines include adopting a new design and format for our badges and name tags. All sworn officers will be issued a badge number. They will have two methods of identification moving forward, both number and name. And name tags will have officer last name and number clearly visible. We are going to be providing a combination of name tags that may be sewn on. The vast majority will be sewn on to garments, so there'll be no issues when officers need to change clothing. It will allow flexibility to transfer name tags in certain situations, and it will assist the officers in their day-to-day duties as they often have to change outer layers of clothing, uniforms, or equipment, depending on their role or response. I just wanted to share with the board, and appropriate policy will follow, which will also be shared. Thank you.
Okay, great. And maybe at our next meeting, if there's follow-up. Oh, I see Commissioner Chris. I didn't think anybody else was going to say. If there's any follow-up questions for folks, maybe we could save it once we have a little bit more time. But Commissioner Chris, feel free to jump in.
Just a quick question, Chief. I appreciate that update. It's very great to hear. I know that you said there will be a policy to follow, and I just wonder whether the policy will contemplate prohibitions on alterations to uniforms. So that's one piece, and then the second piece would be, as we are the board, and as we do have responsibility for policy matters, I would suggest that if there is a role for the board in either crafting that policy as part of a group, or a team with your folks internally, or in reviewing it, I would think, I would stress quite strongly that I think that once the policy is finalized, it would be excellent for the board to review it, to be brought to a meeting, So yeah, those would be my 2 points.
So thanks, Commissioner, and through you, Chair. A couple things. It really will be a policy update. There is no ability currently under the current policy for people to wear other things than are listed in policy. So that's one piece. This actually brings two-factor identification for our officers for operational deployments. And that is very clearly what people will be looking for. As stated, I'm happy to share the policy with the board once it has been prepared.
Thanks, Chief. Acting Chief Superintendent Campbell, anything that would be important for us to know?
Thank you, Chair. Just in the interest of time, I think what I'll do is I'll pass on this one. I was going to just provide the Board of Police Commissioners with an update on some new members to RCMP Halifax District, as well as a few promotions, but I can wait for our next meeting.
Okay, that works. Appreciate it. So looking at our next items, all we have are in-camera minutes. Anyone want to move the in-camera minutes?
Yeah, I'll move those, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Kent, seconded by
Commissioner Kent, yeah.
seconded by Commissioner McDougall. The January 31st and February 3rd in-camera minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And there's no other items in camera, right? That was just a minute. I think so.
Chair Smith is Ian McLean here. That is correct.
Okay, great. So our next meeting is March. It has 8-9. What does that mean?
Sorry,
Sorry, Andrew. Chair Smith, we did send out a doodle poll to everyone to talk about our special meeting.
Okay, great. So yeah, Dave, our next meeting will be either March 8th or 9th, and that would be for the budget that was sent back from council. So we'll obviously make sure folks are well aware of when that meeting will take place. And our next scheduled commission meeting will be March 21st, 2021. So with that, call for adjournment. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Christie, yeah.
Chair Smith, do you mind if I just provide some notices of motion?
Gosh, my fault. I totally skipped that. Yes, please do.
No problem. Okay, so I promise I won't take any longer. I'm trying to speak more slowly. I went and watched the YouTube video and I found I speak real quick. I'm trying to speak slowly, but I'll try not to take too much time. I'm going to be bringing 4 notices of motion at the next meeting. They're mostly for staff reports. So the first staff report that I'm going to be bringing, I can read it if you like. Andrea provided me the wording. So take notice that at the meeting on March 21st, 2022, meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners, I intend to move a motion to propose that the Board of Police Commissioners request a staff report from HRM Legal Services, clarifying the meanings of the phrases discipline, personnel conduct, contract negotiations, and security of police operations in Section 51 of the Police Act. The staff report should provide a definition for each of these grounds for going in camera and explain what evidence is required under each ground before the board can move in camera. That's the first one. At the meeting on the 21st, I'm going to be bringing another motion that's going to request that the chair of the Board of Police Commissioners direct the chief officer of the Halifax Regional Police to draft a staff report providing details regarding their ongoing policies and procedures review, which will include information regarding the policies that are being reviewed, who is doing the reviewing, how the reviewing is being conducted, and when the review is expected to be completed. That's the second motion. The third motion that I'm going to be bringing is for a staff report dealing with a revamp for the budget approval process for fiscal 23-24 to bring it in compliance with the Police Act. And I'll say more about that when we get there next meeting. That'll be a staff report that I suspect will come from a combination of legal and the CFO's office. And the fourth motion that I'm going to be bringing is a staff report requesting and looking into the feasibility of moving the crossing guard program and the youth advocate program out of the police budget and into another budget of HRM.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else who notices motion? Okay, seeing that, now I'll ask for an adjournment. All right, thank you, Commissioner Kent. We are adjourned. Great work, everybody. Hope everyone has a great week, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thank you.